The last words from Duke's mouth had been clearly heard by everyone. By now, even Layla stopped complaining, and every single one of them remained motionless in the room. They received confirmation that one of them had been caught. There was always the possibility of something like this happening. However, before getting caught by the military, Quinn always thought that another student would have at least gotten them first. He prepared for such a scenario, but he wasn't ready for this one. "Fight them! Get him out of there!" A voice seemed to be resounding at the back of his mind. However, he kept his rationality in proper order. Quinn didn't have the power to fight against the military just for one person. Currently, Peter was left in the room. He was sitting down on a chair at the table. His hands were still cuffed behind his back. Nathan and 4 other soldiers were in there with him. However, Duke was no longer in the room and went somewhere else. The room was silent. Meanwhile, Nathan was preoccupied with watching some of Peter's previous films. He wanted to make sure that he hadn't misread the information he had. In fact, he was extremely sure that Peter didn't have an ability in the first place and had later been given the Earth ability. But when Nathan used his ability to drain away Peter's MC cells, he realized that the latter was using a transformation ability. As he was still in his chair, handcuffed, Peter continually looked around the room to find an opportunity for a way out. Despite a small bubble being left over around his hands, the energy he recently lost was already starting to recover. It was for this reason that a part of his body felt incredibly weak. Thankfully, it seemed like they underestimated Peter's true strength. In just a short amount of time, he would be strong enough, even with the bubble on him, to break free from the handcuffs. Peter glanced at the guard closest to his right side. Once he broke the cuffs, if he reacted quick enough, he should be able to kill him in one blow. Even if he was attacked by the others, his body would be able to withstand or heal any of their hits. Peter also had another trick up his sleeve. He could turn 2 people into lesser whites. If he was to use this now, then there was a higher chance he would be able to get out of this situation. However, despite this plan in his head, there was one more person he had to take in mind. Nathan was still here. He was unsure of exactly how strong Nathan was and what his ability did. And with Nathan being a general at the military base, Peter was sure that he was strong, but he had no choice left. This was a risk he had to take. A portion of his energy had now come back, and with a slight tug, he tested the cuffs that restrained him. "Wait!" a small voice directly echoed in his ear. "Don't do anything yet, Peter. We still don't know what will happen to you, so just remain calm." These instructions were being transmitted by the small spider Logan had placed on him before. Peter hesitated for a moment, trying to decide whether he should listen to Logan or not. However, he felt like he could trust him and canceled whatever plans he had just thought up. "Since they got me an errand out of something like this before, they can surely do it again," Peter reassured himself with these thoughts. Unaware of what was currently happening inside the room, no one had a clue what to do next. "We have to start thinking about leaving the military base." Vorden broke the silence. "With Peter or without?" Layla shot back a question. "Without, of course. There's a high chance that they will soon start interrogating him. By then, they'll link him to everything that has happened so far and find out we were all involved." "I think we're safe from anything like that happening," Quinn quickly responded. "I know Peter won't sell us out on his own accord, and even if they did get that girl to question him, it still wouldn't work." "How would you know that?" Vorden asked. "Facts will back me up on this. Peter is different now. One of the things that's different about him is that certain abilities no longer work on him," Quinn explained. Fex nodded in agreement while adding in his own words. "He's right. A white is unaffected by abilities that target the mind or body in some type of way. They are also immune to poison. They don't sleep, and they don't register a heartbeat. A white will never give up his master either. If you're worried about them linking him to us, the only connection you guys have is being his past teammates." "Even so, that still doesn't solve our original problem," Layla continued speaking. "They're going to do something to Peter, and we'll eventually find out he's different. Don't you think that they're already wondering why he has a different ability now? If they find out about his healing capabilities, he'll be used as a lab experiment for the rest of his life." What Layla just said was one of Quinn's true fears. It was why he was extremely intent on hiding his secret in the first place. The fear that he would be locked up in a lab somewhere and be tested on. If that ever happens, then everyone would say it was just fine because it was for the sake of humanity, to help them defeat the Dalki. "There are a few possibilities," Luckily for us, this world still has an order of civilization. I still don't know how far that will get us." Logan started speaking. "Even if Peter is to be moved to a research lab or such, or maybe even treated as a terrorist who works for Pure, he will still have to undergo a trial first. I'm pretty sure that this so-called trial would only be for show. The generals in True Dream have their ways to speed up the process and put the judge in their pockets. What this does, however, is give us a little bit more time. I guess that before Peter attends the trial, an investigation will continue in public or behind the scenes. He'll probably be temporarily placed in the underground dungeons. We aren't sure how heavily guarded it is now, or if we have the capabilities to break him out, but we can use this opening to save him." "Just let this one go, Quinn." Vorden's words sounded like an ultimatum. "You already saved him once before. Forcing a rescue operation would get us all killed. I'm sorry to say this, but if you decide to go through with it, I won't be helping you." The room fell silent once more after Vorden spoke. The reason was that the others kind of agreed with what he was saying. The dungeon was a place where they kept undisciplined students and soldiers. There was a higher chance it was heavily guarded because of this. "Whatever you do, Quinn, I'll be there with you," Feck said as he slapped him on the back. Looking around the room, Quinn could see the expressions on their faces. For some reason, no one else volunteered to help. Even Layla, who wanted to participate in the operation, didn't do so for the simple reason that she felt she was too weak. She knew that by forcing herself to do it, she would only hinder them. "It's okay," Quinn responded. "I've decided. It's best not to save Peter right now. It's too risky and is none of your responsibilities." While saying these words, something in Quinn's mind tugged at him, telling him to try and save Peter. Despite deciding not to go through with the plan, it still kept reminding him, "Is there a connection here from before? It seems like I can fight it a bit now." Even though Quinn had now grown stronger, it seemed like he wasn't going to let his emotions get the better of him. It might have also been the fact that Peter wasn't in immediate danger right now. He knew that the military would not kill him, but instead would perhaps torture him. He had convinced himself that Peter wasn't going to die any time soon, and this was how he stopped himself from trying to save Peter. "That's the right choice," Vorden agreed with him. Was it really, though? Quinn's mind asked this question. For some reason, he had this huge feeling of guilt looming over his head. If he knew he made the right choice, he shouldn't be feeling this way. But right now, he felt nothing but miserable. Just then, another sound emerged from the computer. It was a low and familiar tone. Duke was talking.
"It looks like True Dream decided on what to do with you."
Duke had left the room, leaving Nathan and Peter alone. Although the two generals didn't get along, they knew they were both working for the same side. Duke wasn't oblivious to Nathan's real strength and how he had gotten to his position in the army. If it was just restraining a single student, he could trust him. The reason for leaving the room was to contact True Dream himself. Below the special VIP room, there was the Duke's office. After popping inside, he immediately opened up his communicator and started a video call. An electronic display hovered in the air, and the lines at the bottom showed that a connection was trying to be made. "What is it, General Duke?" Jack True Dream said. "I told you only to call me if you found those two kids." In the video call, Jack was sitting in his chair, and in the backdrop, the whole city that was directly under his control could be seen, showing through the glass windows in his skyrise building.
"Now, you know me better than that,"
Duke replied with a smile. Suddenly, something grabbed Jack's attention. Ever since leaving the military base, he had forgotten what had happened at the school, how the Pures group had made him look like an idiot. Not only that, but he remembered the fear he had in that room. For some reason, the sleeping ability of one of his trusted guards didn't work. It had put him in an unfavorable position, and there was a chance he could have died that day. Before, Jack wasn't too bothered by Pure and the politics between the military and them. Now, he had a significant interest in getting rid of them.
"We have found the boy known as Peter. He was one of the students that Pure said they had safely in their hands. It turns out he never left the academy and was using a disguise ability," Duke explained.
"Excellent. And what about the girl?" Jack asked.
"We have reason to believe Pure might have genuinely taken her. My theory is that the student known as Peter was initially working for Pure all along. They must have hidden that he had the disguise ability, waiting for the perfect opportunity to use it. It would then make sense why the sleeping agent didn't work on him if they managed to prepare something beforehand. I have to add, though, this is all just speculation. We are unable to confirm anything. For some reason, it seems our truth seeker is unable to use her ability on him. Perhaps Pure is advancing quicker than we think and have been able to find something to stop abilities.
The military knew Pure's goal, so they gathered that they must be working on some serum or vaccination that would target the MC cells. So far, there had been no sign of a result. Duke's line of thought was that if they couldn't take away or get rid of their abilities, maybe they could create or alter a person who was able to block them.
"Have you reported this to Paul yet?" Jack asked. "No, I did as you asked and spoke to you first."
"Good. If Paul were to find out about this, he would want the student to go through the court process. If that happens, he might eventually shift them to the research department, and from there, he will be out of my hands," Jack said. "I believe the punishment that will be given to the student will be too light. I have an idea that will not only be a fair punishment for Peter, but will perhaps allow us to punish those Pure members." Jack went on about the details of the plan and recounted the outline to Duke. Both of them needed to be on the same page. After all, technically, Duke worked for the head General Paul. Doing this would mean he was not doing his duty as a soldier and had decided to help out an outsider like True Dream, who technically didn't work for the military, but only closely cooperated with them.
"Excellent," Jack said with a cheer in his voice. "Then we shall meet at the inter-military tournament."
The tough decision was for Quinn and the others to leave Peter behind, and 2 members of the group were struggling with this significantly. In Logan's room, they continued to track Peter's movements, and it was as they expected. Someone had taken Peter to the underground dungeon, or at least that's what they suspected, as the spider's signal was lost, and the area last seen was the dungeon entrance. The next day had arrived, and there seemed to be 2 members of the group struggling with Peter's disappearance the most, one of them being Quinn. He still felt a little responsible for what was happening to Peter. Although the system had reassured him that Peter was fine, due to the current distance between the 2 of them, if Peter was hurt or in trouble, Quinn would be able to feel it if Peter was being tortured or hurt. However, Logan's was a different case. He was in his room, working on one of his gadgets on his workbench. He had been working through the whole night, and usually he worked late, but this was later than usual, and he didn't even take a break. It was as if he was trying to get his mind off of something. Finally, after hours of working on some gadgets, he decided to take a break. Lifting his robotic molecule, he leaned back in his chair. "Oh, that was hard, Peter. Would you pass me a sandwich?" Logan asked with his hand held out, but he felt nothing in his hand after waiting a while. He turned around in his chair and looked at the spot where Peter would usually stand. He hardly ever moved from there, other than to bring him tools and play the VR game once in a while. "There has to be information on that dungeon," Logan said as he hopped onto his computer and started to type away. Back in school, lessons had resumed as usual. Quinn didn't know why, but he seemed to be avoiding the others and was starting to hang around with Fex more often. Even in his room, the conversation with Vorden felt a little awkward. Vorden had helped him out wherever possible, and it was the first time he had decided not to. It wasn't his fault, but Quinn didn't know how to deal with it. Besides, he had problems he was trying to solve. The voice in the back of his head was starting to get louder as more time passed. The voice kept telling him to go against the school and fight them, try to get Peter out of there. He continued to ignore this and went by his days as usual. However, Fex noticed this strange behavior. He would often, at times, suddenly stop while walking, grabbing his head. By now, Fex had already figured that Quinn was the one who turned Peter and assumed that the pains must be from whatever the school was doing to Peter in the dungeon. For some reason, Fex didn't quite believe that, though. The evening had come, and the lessons were over. Some students were still outside the school during this time, while others decided to relax in their dorm rooms. Quinn had stated that he was going to play the game for a bit of practice. Hearing this, Fex agreed to come with him. "Hey, I'll come with you. I haven't played myself in a while." "Oh, darn," Quinn replied. "I just remembered I promised Vorden I would do something with him tonight. Maybe next time." "That's okay," Fex said as he watched Quinn walk off. He knew something was up. It was clear Quinn had said that to get rid of him. These strange actions led Fex to act. Whatever Quinn was doing, it was clear he didn't want others to see it. Once the 2 of them were a great distance away, Fex decided to follow him. The distance between them was quite large, and the reason for this was because of the smell. Another vampire was able to smell another. They had a strong sense of smell and could tell the difference between them too. Still, their eyesight was far better than their sense of smell, so although Fex stayed a distance away, he could still see Quinn. While following Quinn, it had led him down a hallway where he could see him talking to a student he had never seen before. I didn't know he had other friends besides those weirdos, Fex thought. Quickly, the two of them left the corridors and started to head outside. Finding this all too strange, Fex continued to follow the two of them. Eventually, they left the school grounds and entered the woods by the park nearby. Fex quickly realized what was going on by the strange movements the student was taking. He was under the influence of Quinn. Finally, when they reached a secluded spot, Quinn looked around to see if there was anyone he could spot. However, Fex was well trained in the arts of spying and following someone. The experience and training he had were levels above Quinn's, even if Quinn was technically stronger right now. Raising his claw-like hand, Quinn slid a part of the student's forearm and started drinking away. What is he doing? He has Layla, and he can ask for blood any time he wants, right? So why go through all this trouble to get a stranger's blood? Fex thought. Quinn thought as he looked at the student opposite him. The sounds in his head that kept telling him to fight back were getting louder throughout the whole day. It took him a whole day to figure out what the voice was after realizing it was his consciousness. It was his true feelings about what he wanted to do. Quinn didn't just want to let Peter rot down in the cellar on his own. He wanted to fight and get him back. He didn't know how much of his decisions were being influenced by his strange vampire powers. It might have been the connection between the two of them, or whether or not it was his own decision. In the end, he felt like it was a bit of both. He hadn't given up on Peter like he had told the others. He was planning to get him back. To be able to fight back, there was something important that Quinn needed to do, which was to get stronger. Luckily for Quinn, there was a quick way to do that. It was consuming as many different types of human blood as possible. It took a while for Quinn to find somebody, as he had to make sure that they met certain conditions. Since it's night, the student would have to be on their own. It was because nobody could see him talking to the student outside of the campus. There was less chance of someone spotting him. The second condition was that Quinn's influence skill needed to work on them. There were a few high levels, and even some low levels that had a strong-willed mind. Thankfully, Quinn's charm points had increased, giving him even more options than before. However, it was still incredibly hard to find students due to the conditions mentioned above that needed to be met. Using his inspection skill, Quinn knew what stat he would get beforehand. However, he could not pick and choose as freely as he wanted to, due to the small section of students viable. He had selected his first target carefully. After making a small cut on the forearm and taking in the blood, the system granted him a familiar message. O-positive blood type consumed, 1 free stat point earned. Quinn decided to put the stat point into his charm without a second thought, raising the total to 23 points. The reason for doing this was because the stronger his charm skill became, the more people he could use his influence skill on. What Quinn realized after the fight with the King-tier beast was that, even with his strength stat being high, that power meant nothing if he didn't have the equipment to back it up. It was nearly impossible for him to put a scratch on the beast with only his intermediate gauntlets. He couldn't keep relying on the blood hammer strike. It took too long to use. And what would he do if the attack didn't work one day? For now, with no way of getting any new equipment, this was the only thing he could do to get stronger. After fully consuming the student's blood, he commanded the student to head back to his dorm room and forget about everything once he returned. Fex had already left the scene by now, since everything had answered his curiosity. However, it only made him wonder why he needed to do this. For now, he would put a pin on it and keep it in his mind. Come on, Fex, what are you worried about? Is it really strange for a vampire to be sucking the blood of a human? Maybe he and his little girlfriend just got into an argument, Fex thought while heading back. While Quinn was busy outside, it left Vorden in his dorm room on his own. He wasn't his usual calm and chilled-out self, and instead was continually pacing himself up and down the place in one area. If Syl finds out that I went against Quinn, do you think he'll try to take over? Vorden asked. Hey, can you just stop mentioning it? Look, it's not like you two broke up or something, Rayton whispered angrily, making sure Syl wouldn't be able to hear. Besides, if you hadn't said it, I would have tried to take over you myself and stopped you. No suicide missions.
Anyway, about the tournament, are you going to let me fight or what? Your weak ass would just make us look weak. You know my answer. Why even bother asking? Vorden replied. We have to lose on purpose. Many people will be watching this fight, and if we display anything out of the ordinary, then a lot of attention will be on us. It might even cause the family to get involved. Rayton laughed nervously after hearing the words family. It sent a shiver down his spine, and his heart felt like it had sunken in place. Good point. The next few days leading up to the inter-tournament, everyone was off doing their own thing. Layla continued to keep an eye on Sia, and it seemed like she had held to her word, not reporting the incident to any of the teachers or higher-ups. Rather, Sia was talking to Layla more than before. Layla welcomed this. There was an empty feeling in her mind and body after Aaron left, and although it still didn't feel quite the same, Sia seemed to be filling up the place a little. Vorden was often called off by Dell to practice fighting against certain students for the upcoming tournament with the other students, and Logan continued to try to find any information about the dungeon, all resulting in a failure. This left Quinn and Fex to their own devices, but Quinn continued to be distant with Fex, and Fex decided to go along. He continued to follow Quinn at night, and it was the same as before, only slightly different. Each night, a completely different student would be selected. It was never the same student. It was now the third night in a row that Quinn had led a student into the forest to consume their blood. This is strange, even for someone infatuated by the taste of blood. Although Fex knew some vampires were obsessed with blood, how they acted and how Quinn acted were quite different. Quinn would take a minimal amount while consuming blood. This would make sense if he were trying to test out the taste of the blood, but if they found one they would like, they would often store it in a flask-like container. Not only that, but they were picky. If it were blood they didn't like, they would spit it out in disgust. The other thing was that Quinn was quite a young vampire. Usually their sense of taste for blood was quite basic. It was only the older vampires who, after hundreds of years of tasting different blood types, started getting obsessed. So everything he was doing didn't make any sense. Speaking of which, I wonder where my other flask is. Maybe I left it on that planet, Fex thought. When Quinn had finished consuming the female student's blood, he once again had gained an extra stat point, this time in stamina. Yesterday his result yielded another O-type blood, and he placed it into the charm again. 24 charm points, 19 stamina points. Return to your dorm room and go to sleep. You will forget about everything that happened here tonight, Quinn said to the girl. The girl walked out of the woods and back towards the school. Quinn would often wait a while for the girl to return first before moving from his spot, just in case anyone spotted him. He could always say he just went for a walk through the woods. People would look at him weirdly, but there was nothing to be suspicious about. After some time had passed, just as he was about to leave, he heard the sound of something landing behind him, and the leaves on the floor crunching from the impact. "Fex?" he said as he turned his head. "How long has he been here? Did he see me with the student before? Well, it's not too strange, right?" "Hey, don't look so worried, man. Whatever you do in the woods with a girl is your secret," Fex said with a wink. Fex's humorous nature always seemed to calm Quinn a bit, even if he did sometimes say it at the wrong time. "What are you doing here?" Quinn asked. "I was worried about you," Fex replied. "Look, whatever you've been doing these past few days is up to you. You're not exactly doing anything wrong, and you've been careful. Other than me, I don't think anyone else has found out about this. Please think of me as your second pair of eyes." "The reason I decided to involve myself, though, is that I am a little worried about you." "Worried about what?" "I still don't know who your master is. Don't worry, I'm not going to pry about it or anything. I think you would have told me by now if you could, but the problem is, it seems like he hasn't been teaching you properly. I'm serious now, Quinn. You have to be careful. If you keep consuming blood every day like you have been doing, you're going to become addicted." Hearing these words come out of Fex's mouth caused nearly every blood vessel in Quinn's body to freeze. He couldn't help but utter, "What did you say?" "I guess you didn't know, huh?" Fex replied, scratching his head, knowing that this was going to be a tough one to explain. "Think about it. Sometimes when we drink blood, there's this rush that comes over our bodies. There have been studies where it was observed that it increases a vampire's strength by about 10%. That's why I always carry a flask around, not just for healing. The problem is, blood is like a double-edged sword for us. The more often we consume it, the more we crave it.
From an early age, vampires who had close ties to the head of families were taught to resist blood. At first, maybe we can't go on for more than 2 days without blood, but eventually we can build up a resistance to it. The vampires who have been alive for hundreds of years have gone through this process strictly, and now some of them don't even require blood anymore. However, there are occasions where, when they go into battle, they will consume some, and make a note that not all vampires choose to go down this path. If one does drink blood after resisting it for a long time, it will only cause a small setback before they are back to normal again. Still, the same can also happen the opposite way if you keep drinking blood like this for pleasure. Eventually, you will become an addict, craving blood, and not even be able to quench your thirst. To put it in simple terms for you to understand, you would become a conscious bloodsucker. The explanation had Quinn slightly worried. He had been drinking blood quite regularly to increase his strength. If there was an opportunity to consume blood, he would take it because it allowed him to grow stronger. When Quinn first got his vampire powers, he decided to only consume Layla's blood when needed, even though he enjoyed the taste. He was afraid of this very thing from happening. However, once he had obtained the system AI, his original fears started to lessen. Whenever he had a question about vampire matters or when something might do him harm, the system would step in to stop and explain things to him. Undoubtedly, the system AI knew what would happen to Quinn if he was to continue. So then, why didn't it try to stop him? The only thing he could do was ask. "Did you know about this? Is what he's saying true?" Quinn asked. The system had a long pause, and Fex wasn't saying much either. Fex thought that Quinn might have been consuming even more blood whenever they weren't together, such as during training sessions and in the classroom. Perhaps he was having a hard time taking in this possibility. Enjoying the taste of blood was fine, but no one wanted to be a living, conscious bloodsucker. While thinking about this, Fex started to touch his beautiful gel-backed black hair on the top of his head. "I never want to transform again. Maybe one day my hair will completely disappear and not grow back if I do that again," Fex thought. The system had taken such a long time to reply that Quinn had thought it had gone silent and chosen not to answer him. "What Fex says is true, and I'm afraid even with the system, you will be affected by this." "What?" Quinn shouted in his head, but was also cautious about making sure Fex was unable to hear him. Although he was able to keep his thoughts in his head, his body slightly jolted with anger, which didn't go unnoticed. "Why didn't you say anything when I finally thought I could trust you? You pull some crap like this." "First of all, the word you used, trust. I find it strange. In the first place, I am nothing but a system that chose to help you. Not once have I ever told you a lie. I may have hidden some things from you, but without me, you would be more or less in the same situation anyway," the system replied, now with an alteration in his voice, showing that he was annoyed at Quinn's words. Hearing the system speak like this made it feel even more human, or at least not a robot. "To be honest, without me, you would be far worse than you are right now. I never told you or suggested that you go out and consume the blood of your classmates. That was all on you. You wished to grow stronger, and I chose not to get in the way." The system was right. He had never told Quinn to do this. Due to his desire to get stronger, he resorted to this without bothering to determine if there were any consequences. He had been relying on the system too much when he should have stuck to his research. "Hey, don't worry about it too much. It's not too late, and that's why I chose to warn you," Fex said, trying to break the weird atmosphere. "All you need to do is stop drinking blood until you feel that thirst again. Then stretch that limit until you can't give in. Do this repeatedly, and each time you should be able to resist a little longer. Simple, right?" Fex did make it sound simple, and although the process of restoring blood was simple for any vampire, hardly any were able to last longer than a week without feeding, while Fex could last 2 weeks at such a young age. Most vampires weren't able to extend their times between feedings because of the excruciating pain and willpower needed for it. To put it from a human perspective, it would be similar to starving someone who was as addictive as a drug. It would be hard for him to concentrate. As the time between recovers grew longer, so did the pain. There was a point when certain top-tier vampires would pass, where the pain no longer bothered them, which was why they no longer needed blood. If Quinn was to do this, though, he thought perhaps he would have an advantage. The system would inform him when he was hungry enough and allow him to be careful not just to pass the point where he would turn into a bloodsucker. Things that others had to perfectly time and feel, Quinn would be able to cheat it. Don't drink blood for a couple days and see what happens. That way, you'll know how far you have gone. I can help if you like, Fex offered. But Quinn was perplexed about what to do. He didn't have a couple days. Soon the interbase event would start, and they would be away from the base for a week. Could Peter last that long? If he was to do as Fex asked and wait a couple of days, then this would mean he wouldn't continue to grow. I'll think about it, Quinn said as he walked off, not wanting to think about the situation any more. It was giving him a huge headache. That wasn't the answer I wanted to hear, Fex whispered, looking at his back. If he answered like this, then most likely it meant Quinn had decided to continue on the path he had chosen. The next day had arrived, and everything went on as usual. There were now only 2 more days until the inter-tournament. More so than before, Quinn wanted to get his charm stats even higher and later test it on a soldier. If he could get to the point where his influence skill could work on an adult, then maybe he would be able to infiltrate the dungeon unseen and free Peter from captivity. Where to or what to do next, he hadn't quite figured out this part yet. As usual, he did his routine, only this time he was pickier about who to select as his target, carefully searching for an O blood type so he could increase his charm. Eventually, after a long time of searching the school grounds, he found one who met his conditions. The 2 of them headed into the woods and were in the usual spot. Fex had also decided to follow him once more. Quinn, did you not listen to my warning? If you get addicted and need blood more often, I can only help you this much if you reveal yourself to the outside world. When they come, even I will have to go into hiding, Fex thought, looking at the scene. Just as Quinn was about to cut the student to absorb some blood, a message appeared. Your hunger starts to grow. You must consume blood within 24 hours. Every hour, 1 HP will be lost until blood is consumed. It had only been a little over the 24-hour mark, and he received a message. Something that would have usually taken 2 days in the past. The drop of blood was already on Quinn's finger, but after seeing the message, he hesitated to consume it. It had only been a little over 24 hours, and his HP would now start to decrease if he didn't drink any more blood. Is this what Fex was talking about? Have I already started to become an addict? Quinn thought. He started to wonder if he continued to go down this path, how soon would he need blood? Will it get to the point where blood needs to be consumed every hour? In a way, he was lucky that he had caught it now. It was only because of Fex's message that he had decided to be even pickier with his victims. He was trying to select an O blood group person who also met the condition of being a student and alone. This caused him to select someone a little later than usual. If he had taken the blood at his regular time, he would have never received the message and would have continued onward until the tournament. He started to stare at the blood seeping from the cut on the student's arm, trying to think if there was any way for him to get around this problem. Storing blood was a challenging task, even if he wanted to keep it for later. It was why he was so thankful for the blood bank. Unfortunately, the blood bank worked in a way that meant he would have to consume too much blood. Only when his HP was full would blood from the victim go into his blood bank, which meant he would have to consume the blood in the first place, which wouldn't help him at all. Go back to your dorm room and forget about everything that happened tonight, Quinn said quickly, in an annoyed voice. He decided not to consume the blood. Right now, a day or 2 wouldn't be a problem, but if he continued down his path and something happened like before, where he was separated from the others, it would be disastrous. He didn't know how much time would shorten every time he consumed blood, but it was a risk he wasn't willing to take. With his head looking down to the floor, Quinn clenched his fist tightly. Peter, I'm sorry, but I won't be able to save you this time. I'm not strong enough. Not yet. Seeing Quinn's actions had put a smile on Fex's face. Many vampires didn't heed this warning and continued to consume blood. Eventually, the Punishers needed to step in and deal with the problem. Thinking about that particular group of vampires, better known as Punishers, started to give Fex a tingling feeling. He had never seen a Punisher himself, but had heard the dreaded stories about them. Instead of consuming blood from his blood bank or relying on Layla for blood, Quinn decided to allow his HP to continue to decrease every hour, hoping to build up his resistance. It wasn't very pleasant for him, as he wished he had known about this sooner. Right now, he had 95 points of HP, which meant it would take 95 hours before his HP would reach nearly 0. When he was a lower level, building up a resistance wouldn't have been much of a problem. Over the next 2 days, Quinn no longer did his nighttime task. He still had hope, since the soldiers still hadn't done anything drastic to Peter. It didn't even seem like they were torturing him. This was all because Quinn could still feel connected with Peter, but he didn't seem to be in pain or distress. After hours of searching, Logan could find near to no information about the dungeons underneath the military bases. Not only at their military base, but even others. In truth, this scared Logan from trying to help Peter even more. He was the type of person who did everything with a plan in his head. Every action had a chance for an outcome. With no information, he felt like a blind man walking through a maze. He continued to search, hoping to crack something. However, they had run out of time. It was now time for the inter-military base tournament. Each class first appeared in their home rooms, making sure they had everything they needed. Inside Quinn's backpack was the flask that Fex gave him when they were on the expedition. He had tried to return it, but Fex refused. Inside the flask was Layla's blood with a single drop of blood from the oat blood type. Although he wasn't able to consume the blood that day, he had placed some of it in the flask. 40 of 95 HP. His HP continued to decrease, and once it was low enough, Quinn would be able to drink it and gain the stat point. The flask held 200 milliliters of blood, the same amount as his level 2 blood bank, giving him a total of 400 milliliters of blood to regenerate from. However, there was no need for it for the event since he wouldn't be taking part. It was always best to be careful, just in case. After all the students had finished packing their belongings, they followed their homeroom teacher outside in front of the school gates. All of the students were lined up in a single file with their homeroom teacher out at the front. On the right side of the front entrance, the first-year students stood, and in front of them was General Nathan. On the left side, in front of the gate, all of the second-year students stood, and in front of them was General Duke. On both of the general's side were the sergeants. Standing in the center of the two groups was General Mike, who would lead the students during this event. He had the ultimate say. Paul, the head general, would stay behind, just like the other head generals. They were to remain at the base with the other soldiers. If an attack was to occur for whatever reason, military personnel were needed. It was essential to leave somebody in charge, and someone strong enough to defend the base. "All right," Mike yelled in a loud, booming voice. Somehow his voice was loud enough to carry outside and be heard from the very last of the crowd. "Your teachers will now be calling out the following students who will be participating in the events. Please come up to the front once your name has been called. Everyone else, remember, you are to support these people. Cheer at the top of your lungs," Mike shouted, banging his chest. There was silence among the students. "I said cheer!" Mike yelled again, and the students responded, shouting back. First, all of the second-year students who were participating in events were called up. There were a lot of events to go through, since the event was similar to the old Olympics. There were even some that were banned from using the abilities. After all the students for the regular events were called up, the students for the 3 primary events were called up. A single student from each homeroom group would be selected for the main events. In front of them, 10 second-year students were to participate in the fighting tournament. Quinn was around the middle of his line. Still, his eyesight was great, and he was able to see that every single one of the students selected was level 8. The ability system only went up to level 8. There was a good chance some of the students who stood up there had abilities that went beyond their grades. Now that all the second-year students had finished being called out, it was time for the first-year students. 3 students from each class were selected for the 3 events and walked up to the front. Finally, it was time for Dell's class. He started by calling up the students for the crafting event and then moved on to the others. "For the ranged event, Layla Monroe." She walked slowly to the front, but was prepared. When walking past, she made sure to keep her head down, avoiding eye contact with those in her class. However, this didn't stop her from hearing the cruel remarks. "How much do you want to bet on her elimination in the first round?" a student said. "First round, I think she'll forfeit before it even starts." "It should be me up there." "I think I would do a better job, and I don't even use a ranged weapon." Just then, a voice came. "Layla, do your best." She looked up to see who had said those words. To her surprise, they came from Vorden. She smiled at him before hurrying it up to the front. "And finally, for the fighting tournament."
Borden, who was near the front of the line, had already started moving before hearing his name being called out, but after a few steps, he suddenly froze, hearing Dell's last words. "Student Peter Chuck." When he called out Peter's name, everyone who belonged to Dell's class started to look at each other in confusion, while Quinn and his friends just stood there stunned. Due to Peter's shocking incidents, many knew who he was, especially after he was suspected of working with Pure. However, the other classes were unaware of why Dell's class was gossiping and making an uproar. "Is that the same Peter as before?" a student said. "I thought he was a member of Pure." "Maybe he wasn't, and they just found him?" The speculation surrounding Peter grew as to why he hadn't appeared. If he was there in front of them, it meant the military must have cleared him as innocent. Still, after the students stopped wondering why Peter was there, a bigger question popped into their minds. Why did he get selected as a replacement for Borden in the fighting tournament? Peter was well known for being a level 1 weak Earth user for most of his school days. It was only later that he had improved and managed to get himself up to level 4. The students weren't the only ones questioning their motive, though. So were Quinn and the others. Out of thin air, a light circle started to light up at the front, next to where the other students stood. A few moments later, the light had dissipated, and in its place stood a soldier, and in front of him was Peter. When seeing Peter in front of their eyes, their hearts and minds started to settle slightly. Everyone there felt a little guilty for deciding not to rescue Peter. Seeing him up on the stage without a single scratch on his body allowed their minds to be at ease. "It looks like the connections were right after all," Quinn thought. "They haven't been hurting him in the dungeon, but why have him participate in the tournament? It makes no sense." However, Logan, who had been busy coming up with multiple outcomes, had thought about this possibility as well. It was just one of the lower-chanced ones. At this point, the military most likely already considered Peter as a member of Pure. Not only had the video been made confirming this detail, but the fact that he re-infiltrated using a transformation skill was like a double confirmation in their eyes. The only reason why they would want Peter to be in this fight was if they thought Pure was watching. If they cared about Peter that much to save him from the clutches of True Dream, then perhaps they would do the same again at the interbase tournament. The problem was, it wasn't Pure who had saved him last time. They didn't care about Peter at all. What this also meant was Peter wasn't out of the woods yet. The fighting tournament would be the stage to show all of the Pure members what they were doing to their colleagues. After all the participants were called out, the contenders were all shipped off together and headed out first. Following General Mike, Layla decided to stay close to Peter. She didn't know any of the others and wanted to learn more about what was in the dungeon. This was because part of her mission at the military base was to find out information about the dungeon. "Hey, Peter, are you all right?" Layla whispered. Before Peter could even answer, one of the soldiers escorting the group by their side got in between the two of them. "No one is permitted to talk to student Peter Chuck until after the event," the soldier said. Layla backed down, and the other students found it strange that Peter was receiving special attention, but they didn't think much of it. They were far too focused and excited about their upcoming events. The rest of the students followed the two generals, Nathan and Duke. They carried on walking and took a path around the main central plaza area. It was where most of the non-military personnel and soldiers who were on break would be resting and enjoying their time. Eventually, they were led to a place they hadn't seen in a long time. It was the training ground. It was a place mainly used for soldiers to practice battle with their mechs or test new equipment, but today it was empty. A massive orange wasteland with barely any signs of life, apart from a few large craters here and there, made from who knows what. Towards the side of the field were several large handlers. Usually these would be used to store such equipment. The students were then led over to the hangar. When inside, it was different from what they had imagined. It looked like the whole place was empty. There weren't any mechs, not a single storage box or anything. "They must have cleaned this place out recently," Logan said. "What made you say that?" Fex replied. Logan and Fex were part of the same class, but they didn't speak much to each other when Quinn wasn't around, perhaps due to their first meeting not being a pleasant one. Not everyone enjoyed being blasted to the other side of the room. Fex had only joined Quinn's team before due to Aaron, and then Peter left, and Logan was never in their class to begin with. Since this wasn't a portal outing, there were no such teams, and students had to stay with their classmates. "You see all that rubble? If it were like this from the beginning, the dust would have settled. There are also several markings and patches suggesting that things have been moved out of here recently," Logan explained. "Oh, well, not like it means much. I thought we were going to head over to Military Base 1. What the hell are we doing here?" Fex asked. "Attention!" Mike shouted, and the student stopped and saluted. The next few words he spoke were short and sweet. "Good night!" In an instant, he had placed a mask over his face, and at the same time the soldiers, including the sergeants and staff, all did the same. Gas instantly started filling the room. Some of the students began to panic, while a few remained calm. "Of course this would happen," Logan said. "They gassed us on our ride here, and now that we're moving to another base, don't you think they'll do the same?" Logan gently let out before his eyes closed and fell to the floor. The students around started to collapse one by one. "Your body is being affected by a strange substance. Resistance +1. Resistance +1. You are now immune to the substance." Quinn had received the same messages which appeared when he was traveling to the school by bus, only this time it had stated he now had immunity against it. Looking around, he could see all of the students nearly collapsed by now, with a few struggling to fight against it. One of those was Fex, but even he was eventually affected and fell on the floor. Unlike Quinn, it was his first time being subject to the gas. Not wanting to seem suspicious, Quinn too decided to sway his body slightly while letting his limbs go floppy and faking a fall to the ground. Once all the students had been put to sleep, the hangar doors were opened, allowing the gas to be let out. After the soldiers got to work, they placed a black bag over each of the students' heads. After what had happened with Peter, the military was taking extra precautions. There was a chance a student could be woken up or even have an ability that counteracted the smoke. While Quinn was being bagged, he tried his hardest to pretend to be asleep. It seemed to work, as after the bagging, the soldier went on to the next student. It was impossible to see, but he could still hear everything that was going on outside. The sound of something large and heavy was heard, followed by several men grunting. He could then hear the squeakiness of wheels. A big clunk was heard, and what followed after was a sort of humming sound, like an electric current passing through something. "I've heard this sound before, but where?" Quinn thought. He tried to pinpoint the sound, but his mind was working against him. It was nearly impossible to shift through his memories until he figured out where he had heard this sound before. "Start shifting the students in, through the portal one by one," a soldier said. The words were spoken from far away, and maybe others wouldn't be able to hear them, but Quinn could. He finally figured out why the sound was so recognizable, because it was the sound of a teleporter. "Wait, why do we need to go through a teleporter?" Quinn thought. "Wasn't the military bases on Earth?" After finding this information out, he felt like there were two possibilities. Either the bases weren't located on Earth, or the event itself was on a different planet altogether. Right now, Quinn would do anything to rip the black sack off his head, and the problem was he really could do it. He was 100% conscious of what was happening around him. The main reason for this was to see the color of the portal. If it were a white portal, it would indicate they were traveling somewhere on Earth. If it were a colored portal, he would know they were going to a different planet. Military Base 1 was different from the other military bases. It was where the current government would reside, hiding behind the most skilled personnel. It was also where the leaders would gather, and was the only base that didn't have a school campus. The place and locations of all military bases were kept secret to the students during their time at the academy. This was to stop information from being leaked outside. This included the smaller factions in the outside world that didn't quite agree with the military's doing. This is why Quinn thought it would make sense for the main military base to perhaps not be situated on Earth. However, he wasn't able to find out, or, at least, not today. Because before he could think of it anyway, his body was lifted and chucked into the portal to the destination on the other side. Over at one of the other military bases, a school was also getting prepared to send all their students to Military Base 1. Nate was at his desk, sitting down, staring blankly at the pieces of paper lying in front of him, while the other students were busy packing away their things and getting ready for the tournament. "You are still looking at that thing?" Sam said in shock as he came over and placed his bag on the desk and sat nearby Nate. "We are going to depart any second now, and you still haven't even packed your things. Get up already." I know, Nate replied, but I think I might have found the person we were looking for. You mean the blood evolver? I'm not saying he isn't in the tournament, but I do doubt your slow brain, which is good only at fighting, was able to figure out something like that. Go on then, tell me, how did you reach your conclusion? Nate then lifted the sheet of paper that he had been staring at all this time. The paper showed a long list that contained all the names of students who would be taking part in the interbase tournament. Seeing the paper's contents, Sam's eyes widened in shock, and he quickly moved his hands to put the papers down on the desk, grabbed his bag, and placed it over the list of names. "Are you damn crazy?" Sam whispered. "How did you even get the list of names of all the participants?" "It seems like fate wanted me to find them, Sam. When I came into the classroom yesterday night, it was on the teacher's desk. Somebody must have misplaced it." Slapping his hand against his forehead, Sam was starting to wonder how Nate had ever made it this far in life. Although this side of him was why the two of them were good friends and got along in the first place. "That doesn't mean you can just take it for yourself." "Oh well, too late now. As long as we return it, it should be okay and may save us from all the trouble we are going to face," said Sam. "Anyway, after finding the list of names, I started to do some research. I contacted students from the other schools inquiring about each of the participants in the fighting tournament. The main thing I was looking for was a student that fought with gauntlets. After all, there aren't many students who chose to do battle with such a close-ranged weapon. Not only that, but based on the information we have, we know he is a first-year student. This narrows down our suspects even more. After asking around, it seems like there is only one student who fits the bill. He goes by the name of Larry Starr. This person is our blood evolver. He has to be. No, I'm sure of it. I can feel it in my gut." At the start of the explanation, Sam was on board and was starting to be impressed. Was this the same Nate he had grown up with? However, hearing those last words caused Sam to take a step back a bit. Whenever Nate had a gut feeling about something, it was always 100% wrong. He decided to shrug his shoulders and let Nate go on with his wild thoughts. It wasn't hurting anyone this time, so there was no harm done. "Okay, but what about the zombie? You were interested in him as well, right?" Sam asked. "About that one I have no idea. We might not even see him since the nature of his ability is only to heal. I agree that he was strong in combat, but on a tournament scale while not in the game. The fights might not work out the same way." Sam decided to move his bag off the list of names. He then decided to grab the pieces of paper and return them to the teacher's desk before she could enter the classroom. While placing it at the front, Sam couldn't help himself and take a peek at all the names on the list. These names would be of the people who would, in the future, control the world. What Sam also noticed was that each of the names was a little number in brackets. When looking at Nate's name, the number 6 could be seen. Judging by this, he could easily assume that all the numbers indicated all the students' ability levels participating in the fighting event. "You've always been the underdog in these types of situations, but I know you'll prove everyone wrong." Looking at the names, one could see that Nate was one of the lowest levels in the fighting tournament, especially when looking at all the second-year students. Nearly every student that was participating was either a level 7 or 8 in terms of ability level. Nate was the exception in this challenge. Using his high fighting skills, he would be able to overcome the difference in his strength of abilities. There was also a second reason why Nate could compete on an even level with the higher ability levels. It was because of his soul weapon. Although abilities could be the same, soul weapons were often not. Even if two students had the same earth ability level, their soul weapons would be completely different. One could come in the shape of a hammer, while the other may be a shield. Some soul weapons weren't even objects themselves, but were seen as an evolution of their abilities. With how different soul weapons were between each person, they would sometimes make a massive difference in power. In this case, Nate's soul weapon would increase his power to the point that it will allow him to fight them on an equal level. This was why Nate was respected by the higher-level students, and looked up to by the low levels as well for overcoming that gap. Looking through the names, something had caught his eye. He was sure that Nate would be at the lowest level there, even out of the first years, but it seemed that wasn't the case at all. "What? They can't be serious! Am I seeing things correctly?"
Sam brought his head closer to the sheet of paper to have a closer look, but he wasn't mistaken at all. One of the first years, they have a level 1 on her. What were they thinking? Are they trying to get her killed? It has to be a typo, right? When inspecting the names closer, Sam also noticed that there were lines between all the participants' names in the fighting tournament. He wasn't quite sure what this meant, but if he was to take a good guess, it would be who their opponents were in the first round. Across from the level 1 name, Peter Chuck was another Year 1 student who went by the name of Larry Starr, a level 6 user. Well, what are the chances of that? I guess you might be able to go against our so-called Blood Evolver after all. It should be an easy win for him. As Sam put the piece of paper down, he looked up and realized that all the students had suddenly gone silent and were staring in his direction. Finding the whole thing strange, he tried to turn away when a slender body came into his view. "Now, would you like to tell me what you were doing with that piece of paper?" Silver asked with a smile. Get the color of the portal was killing Quinn. However, he decided to keep the black sack covering his face. After all, it wasn't worth it. There was no need for him to worry about where the first military base was. He didn't know why he was getting a little obsessed over it. It wasn't like he was working for Pure or the Dalki. They would have done anything just to obtain this type of information. Even if Quinn did know, it wouldn't have helped him anything. Unless he was planning to take on the military, he could never imagine doing such a thing in his entire life. The second his body passed through the portal, he could feel the strange sensation that would usually occur. It felt like your mind was melting. The experience wasn't all that bad, but the imagery was certainly strange. He was surprised that when passing through the portal, this strange sensation didn't wake up the other students. This also meant that the gas, or whatever was used to knock them out, was strong enough to disable them. As he thought about it a bit more, he was kind of surprised that it was able to place Fex asleep. Having decided to not take off the black bag, once through to the other end of the portal, Quinn continued to pretend to be knocked out. His body was chucked and moved, gently sometimes by some, and quite rough by others. As they continued moving about, he consistently heard strange mechanical sounds around him. It was driving him a little crazy, since he was trying to picture what was outside by only using his ears. "I wonder how Leo does it. I would hate it if I became blind." Quinn couldn't help but think this. Eventually, after a couple of hours of being chucked around from place to place, his body wasn't moved for the last 15 minutes. And then, the first student other than him woke up. What the hell is on my head?" the student shouted out. Despite opening his eyes, the only thing he could see was the color black. The thought of the world being taken over entered his mind. This caused him to start screaming. I'm sorry, please don't kill me." The student continued yelling before feeling a bump on the back of his head. "Calm down, will you? You just arrived at your destination," the soldier explained as he took the bag off the student. Because of his screaming, it managed to wake up quite a few students. Very slowly, every one of them started waking up. "Please remove the bags from your heads and stay where you are until further instructions have been made." The voice was recognizable, and it seemed to come from old General Mike. All of the students did as instructed and removed their bags, and for the first time in a while, they could finally see. The students were slightly confused as to where they currently were. There was no clear sky, and all they could see was metal. 1,000 students all stood in a clear open space, with the generals at the front of the large room. "Are we still in the hangar?" a student asked. Quinn couldn't blame the student for thinking that, because it did look like they had never left the hangar in the first place. However, only he knew that they had gone through a portal. All of a sudden, the sound of something coming from behind them could be heard. The pressure head was released, and the light started shining through. When the students turned around, they could see the sides of whatever they were opening up, and a metallic platform stretching out. It eventually hit the floor. There was a good 10 meters from the opening before the platform had touched the ground. "Please make your way down the vehicle." Mike continued his instructions while the soldiers at the front led the way. When stepping outside, they finally noticed that they were in the first military base. However, it didn't look all that different from theirs. It was more like a city with certain buildings surrounded by construction. There were mechs out and about, transporting cargo. The main difference was the size of the base itself. It was nearly 2 times more than theirs. However, the most shocking thing they saw so far was the sky. Although it could be seen, it looked slightly different from what they were used to. This vague feeling continued bugging Quinn, however, he couldn't figure out why. What he did notice, though, was the shine going all across them. The entire city seemed to be encased in a large glass-like dome, and around the edges was a high-rise wall, making it impossible to see what was outside of the city unless one was in an airship. Once the students looked behind them, only then did they realize what type of vehicle they were in. It looked like a submarine on wheels. The thing was extremely huge, and it had 16 wheels the size of houses on its side. Quinn then realized what was making all that noise from before. The teleportation device must have transferred them somewhere, and later they needed to be moved via the vehicle in front of them. Once all of the students were accounted for, the vehicle started retracting its platform. Once it was finished, it immediately headed off in a different direction. Mike, Nathan, and Duke went out to greet another soldier. They later followed him until they reached a train stop. Since the base was large, getting to their destination by foot would probably take them a few hours. While riding the train, the students were able to see more of the city. It seemed like the city itself was split up into different sections, and between each section was a small barrier. Each of these sections had soldiers focus and prioritize different things. At one of the sections in the city, they witnessed mechs being built and tested. In the next one, it looked like they had beasts in captivity and were doing some type of experiments. And next, it seems as if they had combat-focused classes, and so on. They then went and passed the city center. It was a large dome-like building that looked like a miniature version of the base itself. It firmly stood at the center. The top of the dome had a flower-like design that looked similar to a poppy. The army decided to use this symbol after the First War. Most of the battles between the Dalki took place on Earth. There was a lot of blood spilled on the battlefield. Once the war was declared over, something strange seemed to happen. On the fields all across the world where most deaths have occurred, fields of poppies grew. In the past, it was said that something like this happened once before. However, it had been long forgotten. Despite that, they still chose to use it as their symbol. This building was the world's government's headquarters. It was where the 8 head generals, the leader, and the big 4 family leaders would meet to make their decisions. It was like they were in control of the world. The train continued moving past the city center and eventually went towards the back of the city, where it seemed a little less busy. They passed another small barrier of some type, and many mechs and soldiers seemed to be standing guard. They entered another part of the city which was separated from the others. Once the train finally stopped, the students got off and continued to follow Mike. After they exited the trains, they could finally see where the event was going to take place. It was an arena that was large enough to host the Olympic Games right in front of their eyes. It was quite round in shape, almost looking like a wheel on its side, and it was made of glatherium. It had a slight tint of blue. What surprised them most, however, was that, on top of the arena stands, 7 large buildings seemed to have been built into the thing, making it look like a crown. The 7 buildings had a clear, open glass that was tinted black. All of them faced inwards toward the arena. On the front, large numbers were starting from 1 and ending at 7. "Okay, since you guys are from Military Base 2, please make your way to the 2nd building," the guide who had been leading the generals spoke to them. "Because you're the first ones here when you finish unpacking your things in your rooms. You are free to explore the area. The buildings here are like hotels. You are allowed to check in and out whenever you want for now. Outside the top of the arena, there are many shops and markets stationed for use. Since you guys won't be participating in the event itself, we wanted to make you all feel welcome. Shop around and have fun. See if there is something you want to do, and treat your stay here as a holiday. Just remember to support your teammates when you can." Quinn was wondering where the others were since he hadn't seen them. Although he saw them in the hangar, as they were the first ones to enter, they were shortly separated once again when they moved into the large vehicle. The participants were most likely already in the field or were staying at a separate location altogether. The students followed their teachers to the arena, while the generals had split off in a separate direction. With the large building having plenty of space to accommodate everyone, each student was allowed a room completely to themselves. The atmosphere was quite relaxed. After unpacking his things in the hotel room, someone knocked at Quinn's door. When he opened it, both Vorden and Fex greeted him. "Come on, let's go and explore this place. It's so cool. I've never been to such a nice area before," Fex said excitedly. After shutting the door behind them, the trio went and explored the arena's shops. Meanwhile, at the train station, another train had just arrived, bringing in another set of students from another military base. One of the first people to get off the train was Teacher Silver. Taking part in the intermilitary tournament were taken to the arena ahead of time. This was because the participants would be going through some additional checks that the other students didn't need to do. The other reason was so they could be informed of each event's rules and clarify how each event would work. After all, not all events would be as simple as a knockout tournament. They were all taken on a separate train that was heading to the arena, a participant-only train. Each carriage was separated into each military base, full of the second-year and the first-year students. Although some of the second-year students had been through this before, there was still excitement that could be felt in the air. It was an event that only happened once a year. In a way, this was their chance to show their skills to potential factions, as well as get a head start if they were to join the military in terms of ranks. Perhaps even find a mentor to train them, giving them a head start over others. Inside the second carriage were all the second military base participants, and sitting at the front seat with 2 guards by his side was Peter. The second-year students were also towards the back of the carriage and could see what was happening at the front. "Hey, did you see that first year?" a student asked. "Yeah, the guards haven't left his side. Do you think he might be that much of a threat that they need to keep an eye on him all the time? I heard some crazy first years tried going against us this year," another replied. One of the second-year students was looking for that exact student the others were talking about, Momo. Ever since the incident with Vorden in the assembly hall, he had decided to keep his involvement down low. For some reason, during his fight with Vorden, even though he had the upper hand against him, he had to go all out, even using his soul weapon. Something was telling him there was still a chance he could have lost that fight. During that fight, some frightening things happened, one of them being Vorden cutting off his arm. Thinking back to the battle, Momo thought if he would have ever been able to decide that, and even if he did, whether or not he could have gone through with it. There was something wrong with the first-year students that just didn't fit right. Momo wasn't participating in the fighting tournament, but was looking forward to seeing the full strength of Vorden. However, when he didn't spot him on the train, he was incredibly disappointed, and instead saw Peter taking his place, the student they had bullied and forced to go against Vorden. "What are you planning on doing, Duke?" Momo mumbled to himself. He had a feeling that most likely Duke was behind this whole matter. The train had come to a stop, and all the participants were led out of the train straight into the arena. They saw the large buildings on top of the arena. However, they could not meet with their classmates. Instead, they were taken underground in the arena and eventually entered a sizable underground training room. The room was filled with different beast equipment, target tools, gaming equipment, and all sorts. This was a place that allowed the participants to use their abilities freely before they were to participate in their events. As you can see, several rooms are leading to this one. The entrance which you have entered is now locked, and only military personnel who are authorized will be able to pass through. A soldier holding a tablet and containing a scanner over his eye explained. You are free to use this room however you wish before the event. The big day starts tomorrow, so you will have plenty of time to practice. To your right, through the doors, are your sleeping quarters. Feel free to rest whenever you wish. Just behind me is the entrance to the arena. In a moment, we will split you up into groups according to your events, and we will have someone explain and go over the rules. Tomorrow, when your names will be called, and you will be escorted up to the arena. The man then pointed to a large display slightly above him that had hooked onto the wall. We don't want you to be left out, of course. Above, we will be displaying the event to all of you. If you have any problems or concerns, do not hesitate to ask us. With that, the man went off to talk to his team to organize the next step, while the students were free to check out the training room. Many of them went to explore the place, while others wanted to play around with the equipment. Some of the stuff they had back at their bases and used for their training, but some items they had never seen before were excited to test them out and see what they could do. Layla, on the other hand, was busy trying to locate Logan. When looking around, she could see that Peter was allowed to go where he wished inside the training room, but the 2 guards from the train continued to follow him around everywhere. This, of course, gathered quite a bit of attention, and some of the students even tried approaching Peter. Almost immediately, one of the guards would yell at the student to stand back. "Hey, Logan," Layla said, approaching him while looking around to see if anyone was paying attention to her, a habit that was forced into her from her training days. "I was wondering, do you have any idea why they are making Peter fight in this tournament?" Logan looked closely at the 2 guards by Peter's side. He noticed that the equipment they were wearing wasn't of low quality at all. It was at least the advanced level, maybe even higher. If they were to go through this much trouble to guard one student, then it would seem like his hunch was right. "I think they're trying to use this event to lure out the rest of Pure. They think he's one of them after the video we made. It would make sense, and if they believed they cared about him that much to try to snatch him from True Dream, then maybe they would do the same at this event," Logan replied. Hearing this, the sick feeling in Layla's stomach had returned. If that were the case, they would be heavily keeping an eye on Peter, and there might not even be a chance for them to try to save him. Thinking about this, Layla thought about whether or not she should try to get Pure involved. She knew that Peter wasn't a part of Pure. Still, if she were to put a word to her mother, maybe she would help her. Although this thought didn't last long, Layla was currently a rank 100 agent, and she had already called in a big favor from her mother last time. It was unlikely her mother would risk the whole organization for this once again. Knowing this, she was too afraid even to ask. "I'm sorry, Peter, there's nothing I can do." After about half an hour of the students exploring the training area, they were called and huddled up once again. This time they were divided into groups based on the events they would be participating in, as they were told they would before. Logan was placed into the crafting event, Layla into the arranged event, and Peter into the fighting event. The 3 of them were now separated from Peter even further. Each group was led to a different section of the room where a soldier would explain the event's details to them. The 3 main events had the most participating students, since 1 student was required from each homeroom class. 10 students from the first year and 10 students from the second year. With the 7 schools participating, that meant there were 140 students per the main event. In the fighting event, while the soldier was busy explaining the rules to everyone, everyone's attention was focused on one person. Peter, who still at this moment had the 2 guards by his side. It was clear to them that it must have been such a dangerous event, but now that Peter was closer to all the participants, they could spot something on his wrist. The fact that his level on his watch indicated he was only a level 1. How is that possible? Wait, how is he even in the tournament? The students wanted to question it and ask, but the soldier up front was busy explaining the rules and processes to everyone, and they knew better than to interrupt. "Oh, so it looks like Sam didn't misread that name list. There was a level 1 student in the fighting tournament," Nate said. Unlike the others, Nate wasn't too interested in the mysterious figure. He was far too busy trying to figure out of all the participants here, which one was Larry, the Bloody Volver. Right now, the students didn't have their best equipment, so it was hard for him to tell. "And that's about it for the fighting event rules. Now what we will do is go around and take a stage name from you all. This name will be used to announce you before you enter the arena. Try to pick a name that will strike fear and be remembered by all. After all, not only military personnel will be watching this, many top-tier factions have been invited to this event as well." After the explanation was over, several soldiers went around with tablets held in their hands, gathering each student's required information. Finally, one of the staff had arrived at Peter. "What would you like the name of your ring to be?" he asked. Peter thought about it for a while. He, too, could tell the soldiers around him were of a higher class than their military base. If there was ever a chance for him to escape, he should have done so when he was alone with True Dream and the other soldiers. Right now, he couldn't escape, and he couldn't even imagine Quinn and the others thinking of a way of saving him. If he were going to be killed after this anyway, he would go down using all his strength. He wasn't just going to throw away the fight. This meant they would find out about his incredible healing abilities. If he were made into a lab rat, he wouldn't tell them anything about Quinn. He still had respect for Quinn for saving his life, and after betraying them once, he wouldn't ever do it again.
"Are you sure about your ring name?" the man asked. "It's sometimes nice to have a name related to your ability or one that's easy to remember."
"I'm sure," Peter replied. Down on the man's tablet, the name Zombie P was written, a name that, when revealed, would shock the other participants. With the event starting tomorrow, the students were free to do what they wanted for the rest of the evening. There were no strict requirements and even no curfew for the students, which was a first. It truly did feel like they were on a week trip to watch a grand event. Never had they ever been treated like this before. The only rules that were put in place were for students to not leave the arena. Not that it was possible anyway. The arena was located in a separate part of the city, and the only way to get to it was via train, which would go through several different barriers. Stepping off the train, they all noticed the mass amount of security. Leaving this place seemed to be a lot harder than breaking in. However, after living in luxury, they felt like there was no reason for them to try to leave anyway. The three boys, Quinn, Fex, and Vorden, had left the hotel room and headed to the top of the arena. Just like the guide had said, the top of the arena was mostly flat and filled with all kinds of stalls manned by staff. There were coffee stalls, food places, VR games, and all sorts. But what interested most of the students was the equipment stalls. Some of these sold different types of beast gear and armor, as well as items that would go hand in hand with certain abilities while fighting. The boys decided that they would walk around the entire circle, looking at all the shops before committing to buying anything. It was always horrible when one would see something they liked in a shop, only to find something better or cheaper in the next one. "Go on, then," Fex said with his hands behind his back. "What do you think of the sudden change?" "What do you mean?" Quinn asked, confused. "What? Do you mean you can't tell? All of a sudden they're pampering us with nice hotel rooms, shops, equipment, and no curfew?" Fex replied. Quinn hadn't thought about it before. He just felt like the group was currently on a school holiday, like they used to have at school. Near Christmas times and other holidays, school tended to be more relaxed. The world, even the military world, couldn't be all work and no play, could it?
"Looks like you figured it out," Vorden said and motioned around. "The whole thing is a ploy for the students. They show and give them a taste of what life is like at the military base. Some of the students will start to think maybe choosing to join the military rather than the faction isn't so bad, especially if they can have a life like this. I hate to say it, but there's always a motive behind everything." The three boys stopped to take a break and were looking over the edge, down at the arena floor. There were thousands of seats, but none of them were for the students. The students would be watching the fight, either from the top platform they were currently on, or from their hotel rooms. There were multiple large display screens every once in a while, so it wasn't like they would miss anything. The seats themselves were for all the different factions from the Earth and other planets. They had been invited to see the future generation display their power. It was a good chance for the military to show the world that it was necessary to continue to draft teens into the army, as well as for factions to try to get future talent. "Maybe it's a good thing I'm not fighting," Vorden said.
Although these words were spoken quietly with Fex and Quinn's hearing, they both had heard him say these words, and were wondering what he meant by them as he looked at the crowd of empty chairs. Unlike them, Vorden was a talented individual, an original from a good family, but not one of the top four. If he were able to display his strong skills and abilities, he would easily be scouted into a top faction, Quinn thought. His life would be set, and he would have nothing to worry about. So it was strange to see Vorden kind of relieved that he wasn't fighting. The three of them continued walking, and having already done a full circle, they had decided which shops they wanted to stop by. For Quinn, what he truly wanted was a strong or better set of gauntlets to use. His intermediate pair wasn't good enough. However, when they looked around, there was barely anything above the intermediate level. Most equipment at the advanced level or higher would have to be hunted for, or one would need to hire travelers to gather the materials for them. There were a few items, but none that matched what Quinn was looking for. Still, with only boots and gauntlets, there was no harm in increasing his equipment in other areas, one of these being defenses. The best piece of equipment to get would be a type of chest piece. This covered the largest area, and when using his inspect skill, Quinn also found it gave him the most defense points. This time, while walking around, they noticed a lot more students around than before. This was because all of the other military bases had arrived by now, and they too had left to explore. They entered a few shops, and Fex was the first to buy some items. He purchased very small knives that were as large as a finger and had a little ring just underneath the handle. Knowing that he had a string ability, Quinn could imagine Fex being able to do great things with those weapons. While Vorden didn't purchase anything but instead stared at two short swords on the wall, seeing this, a memory came back for Quinn. He had asked Vorden a long time ago if he was to use a weapon, what type of weapon it would be, and he had replied with a pair of short blades. Vorden didn't use beast weapons much, as he seemed to favor elemental abilities, and most elemental ability users didn't really use beast weapons, but still had plenty of beast gear. After inspecting the stats of the swords on the wall and looking at the intermediate blades in Quinn's system shop, he realized how much better the weapons in his shop were. "Don't buy those," Quinn said. "Don't worry, I'll get you something nice soon." Vorden smiled, and the three of them left the shop to head off to the next one. The next shop was a place for Quinn, a shop that mainly focused on armor. A piece had caught his eye before, an intermediate piece that was dark blue and had a silver trim going around the edges. After selling his crystals from the last portal expedition, he now had a total of 4,440 credits to spend. The intermediate piece on the wall was 4,000 credits, so he had enough to spend, but was hesitating whether he wanted to clear his bank like that for one piece of equipment. Inspect. Intermediate Geo-Rock chest armor. No active skills. All stats +1. Defense +20. There were similar priced items in the shop, but this was one of the only ones that increased all stats. Other pieces of equipment improved strength more while giving no stat points to other areas, but this was well balanced. On top of that, it had the most defensive points of the lot. Quinn still hadn't figured out what defensive points did. His gauntlets gave him 8, while his boots gave him 4. If he had the chest piece on top of that, he would have 32 points of defense. Even if he didn't know what to do, the higher number was always better, right? After thinking about it for long enough, he finally had decided to go through with the purchase, reaching out his arm. As his fingertips pressed against the right chest plate, another hand was seen pulling it from the other side. The student to his left turned and looked at Quinn. The first thing that stood out to him was the wristwatch, indicating he was a level 1 ability user. After seeing this, the boy immediately let go. "Please go ahead and take it," the boy said. "You grabbed it first." "You were a little faster than me, you go ahead," Quinn said. With his eyesight, he was able to tell the boy to his right was only a fraction second faster at grabbing the plate. He had no right to claim he grabbed it first. "No, please get it instead of me. I insist, I don't need it," the boy replied once again. The two of them continued like this, while Vorden and Fex stood back and couldn't believe what they were watching. "I guess this is what happens when you have two nice people," Fex said. "Nothing gets sorted." "You think Quinn's nice?" Vorden asked him. Fex thought about it for a while. Most of his interactions with Quinn were nice ones, and after saving his life, he had no other reason but to think he was a nice guy. "You don't?" Fex replied. Vorden didn't reply, but he didn't agree about Quinn being nice. He didn't think he was a bad person, but didn't think nice was the right word. Eventually, after going back and forth, Fex was fed up with watching, and snatched the chest piece, handing it over to Quinn. "Just take it, man. I want to continue shopping." The boy smiled, indicating he was happy for Quinn to take the piece of armor, but before purchasing the item, Quinn wanted to get the name of the student, hoping maybe he would return the favor to him one day. "What's your name?" Quinn asked. "The name's Sam." The system message appeared in front of Quinn's face once again. It was a constant reminder that his health continued to decrease, not that he needed the reminder anyway. Whenever the system message would appear, he would have shooting pains rush through his head and stomach moments before it. His inside felt like they were trying to tear each other apart, and his brain felt like someone was reaching inside and squeezing it. This feeling usually lasted for around 5 minutes before Quinn was able to suppress it. "Hey, are you okay?" Sam asked. "You don't look too good." Fex quickly came over to Quinn's side to give him a helping hand. He was the only one who knew what Quinn was doing, as he had informed him beforehand. Vorden knew something was happening but wasn't aware of the truth, and decided to let it be, figuring out that it was most likely some vampire-related business. Quinn handed over his money card and gave it to Vorden to complete the purchase at the desk. The 4,000 credits were exchanged, and the equipment was placed in a fancy metallic suitcase. By the time Vorden had returned with the item, Quinn had mostly recovered from the pain. "Well, I hope you start feeling better," said Sam. "I'll see you guys at the tournament. Maybe we can meet up and watch it together." Sam didn't have many friends at his military base, being quite the low level himself as a second year. With Nate participating in the fighting tournament, Sam was pretty much on his own, so he thought it would be nice to enjoy the event with some others that wouldn't be quick to judge, being low level themselves. "Yeah, that sounds good." Quinn managed to crack out a smile at the last bit of pain started to fade to the back of his mind. The four of them left the shop together and were ready to part ways as they continued to explore. As soon as they took a few feet away from the shop, they could feel something strange, as if their hair strands stood upright. "We're being followed," Vex whispered. "I know, a group of 5, Vorden replied. The 3 boys weren't the only ones that noticed this. When Sam turned around to check on the 3 boys, he could also see that a group was strangely following them from behind. "What are they planning?" Sam couldn't help but decide to get involved. He knew if Nate were here, he would have tried stopping whatever was about to happen. As expected, the group of students suddenly decided to appear and block the 3's path. The boy at the front had the sides of his hair cut short and a purple streak running down the middle. He quickly glanced down at the 3 watches before deciding to approach them. After confirming all of their ability levels were lower than his, a smile appeared on his face. "Well, what do we have here?" the student said as he got closer. Well, we're a little short on money, you see, and we were kind of hoping to buy something from one of these shops. I had my eye on that chest piece for a while, and when I saw someone else buy it, it just rubbed me the wrong way." The student then got right up to Quinn's face as he said his next words. "Especially when I see a weak level 1 like you getting something like this. It would be useless in your hands." "Inspect. Name, Zach Lee. Ability level 6. Transformation ability." Using the inspection skill, Quinn was able to figure out the level of all the members of the opposite group, even when they were hiding their watches. It made sense why the student Zach was confident. He was a level 6 ability user, and everyone else around him was around a level 4 and 5. As a group, they seemed quite strong. After they had seen that, both Vex and Quinn were only level 1s, even with Vorden being with them. They didn't even think they had a chance of losing. Right now, Vorden had a random ability of a level 4 user he had touched, so his wristwatch was displaying that number. So Zach and his group had even more confidence that the group faced no such threat in front of them. Using his right hand, Zach placed it on top of the metallic case in Quinn's and tried to pull it away using all his strength. When he tugged, though, there was no movement, and his hand slipped off from the metal case. The smile on his face dropped. Quickly, Zach grabbed onto the case again and tried to pull it out of Quinn's hand again, this time getting a more firm grip on the case. But when Zach tried to pull away, a tight grip was felt around his hand, which gripped the case. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Quinn said slowly. "This is mine." Zach's group of friends behind had no clue what was going on, and were still smirking away at the thought of the helpless level 1s having their expensive gear taken away. "Why is this person making me feel sick when I look him in the eye?" Zach thought. Zach had carefully watched Quinn and his friends enter the shop. Even before they had purchased the equipment, he had taken note of their levels. It came as a big surprise when he found out a level 1 user could purchase intermediate gear. Then a thought hit him. Perhaps he was someone from a prestigious, or at least a wealthy family. They had been cursed with a son that was only able to produce a low amount of MC cells, never being able to get past level 1. At that point, the only thing one could do was purchase beast gear to help them on their journey through life. Having made this prediction, Zach never thought a reaction like this would come from Quinn. "Hey, 5 against 3 is a bit unfair, don't you think so? Maybe we should even up the sides a little," Sam said as he walked over. Sam, too, had thought the same thing as Zach when he saw Quinn. The only difference was that Sam thought he could relate to Quinn. He was one of those very people. A person who was unable to progress any higher in his ability level, despite being able to purchase books at a higher tier. His body had already hit the MC cell limit. Seeing Sam come over, Zach's group of friends behind him started to get more aggressive and were getting ready for a face-off. As the tension rose in the air, it felt like either side was going to strike first. However, both Fex and Vorden were worried about a different matter. For some reason, Quinn was upset at the actions that had just occurred. It made sense, anyone would be. The only difference was, Quinn had a critical secret he needed to hide.
"I think I know what you mean about him not being nice now,"
Fex whispered over to Vorden. Even Quinn himself felt his actions were a little stranger than usual. Of course, he always wanted to punish people who did things like this, but right now was not the time, especially with as many military personnel around as there were. Still, Quinn refused to let Zach's wrist go, and he was starting to grip it harder and harder. Zach could feel this, and the pain was starting to get to him. He wanted to squeal or grunt a little, but was too afraid the others would laugh at him if he began to give in to the pain and were to make strange noises.
"What do I do?"
he thought, looking for a way out of this.
"Hey, what is going on here?"
a deep voice said from the side. A soldier had appeared, wearing a military uniform.
"There is to be no fighting during the week's stay here, do you understand? If you disobey, we will have to lock you up for your remaining time here. If there is a dispute, I suggest you settle it through some other matter. I'll be keeping an eye on you," the soldier said as he walked back off, continuing on his way to where he was going before. When the soldier had arrived, Quinn's grip had loosened, and Zach managed to break free in a split second. After hearing the words of a soldier, an idea popped into his head. Maybe there was a way to settle this and get the item he wanted. More than that, Zach felt a little humiliated and wanted to get his pride back. "Fine, I have a little suggestion to make. If you are interested, why don't we play a little game? Your guys versus mine," he said with a smile. Hearing Zach's words, Quinn wanted to refuse outright whatever type of proposal was about to be made. It was clear they were up to no good, and what reason did they have to go along with their little game? "Just get out of here before I—"
Just then, a person from Quinn's right side stood in front of him. "Sounds interesting. What do you have in mind?" Before Quinn could even reject their offer, Fex had chimed in at the last second. The word game had interested him greatly. Besides, they had already finished their shopping and explored the area. Other than going back to their hotel room to rest, there was nothing they could do. Fex didn't care about the results of the events. Besides, they weren't a part of it, so this might have been the only bit of fun he would be able to experience. "Since you guys seem more confident than your usual low levels, I thought this might interest you." Zach and the group started to walk off, and Fex followed without a second thought. The others looked at each other and shrugged their shoulders, deciding to go along. "Don't worry, they can't really do much, and you can always refuse," Sam said. After following Zach and his group for a while, they were eventually led to the game section of the platform. It looked like he did mean that they would play a game, and it wasn't a metaphor for something else. The stall they stopped at had several different booths that were open for the outside public to see. Inside the booths was what looked like an old-fashioned training machine. It was a standard upright thick pole made of metal. The pole was split up into 6 different sections, and each one had another pole sticking out of it. Quinn watched one of the students carefully. A digital countdown appeared above his head. 3, 2, 1. When the timer reaches 0, a buzzing sound was heard. "Game started, level 3. The metal pole started to twist the different sections of its body. However, not all of the sections moved in the same direction. The very top section twisted, and the pole from the top was now coming towards the student's head from the left side. At the same time, the bottom section of the pole had twisted in the opposite direction, making the extended pole attack from the right side. At the same time, the student lifted his left hand and right leg, blocking both of the attacks. The pole twisted again and continued to twist and turn to allow attacks to come from all different directions, aiming at the student's body. That's when Quinn also noticed there was a small ring where the student was standing. "I see, so he has to block all the attacks without stepping out of the ring," Quinn thought. "The higher the level, the faster and more varied the attacks." "My suggestion is we bet that beast armor of yours by playing the game," said Zach. "Each person here will count as a life for our team. The first person will start at level 1 and keep going up until they are eliminated. Then the next person from the team will start from the level they have left off. Then whichever team finishes on a higher level wins," Zach explained. With this type of game, it was best to allow the most skilled person to go last. The reason for this is because the person can watch how the one before them failed. They could get a sense of timing for the machine as well as witness the varied attack patterns. "Your team only has 4 people, so one of you can go twice," said Zach. The reason for choosing this game is because it requires us not to use our abilities. I didn't want to pick something where we would win. This will just be a test of reflexes and quick thinking on your feet." "I don't like it," Vorden said. "I don't have a problem with the game. I think any one of us here will be able to beat your whole team. The problem is, what's in it for us? We gain nothing from this bet, as the beast gear is rightfully Quinn's in the first place." While watching Vorden speak, he was amazed at how much confidence Vorden had. He didn't stutter when speaking in front of these higher levels, and when pointing to his teammates, it seemed like he was genuine when he said he thought any of them would be able to beat them in the game. "I thought you might say that, of course. I wouldn't just be putting up nothing on our side." Zack reached one of his fellow teammates' bags and pulled out a beast crystal. It was slightly clear in color, and after Quinn used the inspect skill, he was able to tell it was an intermediate beast crystal. "Lithy intermediate beast crystal, compatible with an item from the shop." After using his inspection skill, though, another message that he hadn't seen before appeared. After selecting the message, the system immediately took him to his shop, showing him a single short sword. One of the swords in his shop required this very crystal to be crafted. The weapons from Quinn's shop were of higher quality than one could find in the marketplace. The problem was that nearly all of the weapons on it required him to gather specific items to create them. As he was still a student, he was unable to travel to other beast planets to hunt for these things. For now, he decided he would leave it for the future, after he had left the school. Coming across one of the materials to create a weapon was a golden opportunity for him. "We'll play your little game," Quinn said. "Excellent," Zack replied, not doubting for a second they were going to lose. Outside the arena on the bottom floor, Leo stood outside. He had come from the underground area after checking on the participating students. The real reason why he was there, though, was to check on Peter. He had a hand in helping the students during the matter with True Dream. There was a chance that using their strange and strict methods, the military would find out he was also involved in the case. He wasn't worried, but at the same time he had to prepare for the worst. "Originally there was one, and now there are three," Leo thought. He was thinking of the strange auras that he had sensed. At first it was only Quinn. Later Peter's aura had changed, and then a third student had arrived with the same aura. With his ability, he could tell they weren't human, or at least not fully or not the same. "The military might be stepping on their toes in something they can't handle." Leo had a hunch that if these people weren't human, they were going to publicly execute one of their kind. Then maybe they would come and try to save him, or at a later date, these actions could cause a lot of trouble, possibly even another war. The human race couldn't handle fighting the Dalki and another unknown entity. If it came to it, maybe the better decision would be for him to save Peter himself. From just underneath Leo's belt, he had a small pouch where he pulled out a small little flask. It was the one that had been found at the last portal expedition. He still didn't know who it belonged to, but he did know it was a strange and powerful item. The aura surrounding it was similar to his weapons. For a simple flask to be made out of high-quality beast material would be a waste. It had to be something special, he thought. He thought that he might have missed something or a special use for the flask. He unscrews the lid from the top of the flask. The contents inside the flask remained the same, as Leo didn't want to throw it away. He swirled it around, looking at the red liquid inside. "That's blood. I wonder if all of this is linked somehow." As he said those words, he could hear the sounds of footsteps rushing towards him. Leo quickly activated his ability, allowing him to cover a wider range. After doing this, he was even more worried than before. For some reason, the figure's aura seemed to be masked. He could still see the figure, but it seems like whatever was heading in his direction was able to suppress it. Eventually, the footsteps slowed, and now he could get a clearer view of it. Seeing it had a human-like shape. Leo calmed down a little, but was still prepared for anything. The figure was now in front of Leo, but of course, Leo could only tell someone was there and not what they looked like. "Where did you get that flask?" a female voice said. After agreeing to the little bet, all 9 of them rented out a booth and headed over to the area. The people who walked by simply ignored what was going on. There were too many people in one section. It blocked outsiders from being able to see anything that was going on. Although they did find it strange that so many people were in one booth, it still wasn't interesting enough for them to actively try and find out what was happening. Now, all that was left was to decide who from which team would go first. "Please let me do it," Sam volunteered himself. "I know you guys just met me and don't know, but those guys rubbed me the wrong way. Think of it as a freebie. You can observe in the meantime, and when I get stuck on a level, it should make things easier for you guys." Since Sam was insistent and sincere, the others found it hard to refuse his offer. In addition, Quinn liked the look of determination in his eyes. "Sure, go ahead," Quinn responded. They were confident that they wouldn't lose, especially against some of the other students, but against people like these that had never tried to get through life with their hard work, then no, they wouldn't allow themselves to lose to people like this. Sam, on the other hand, volunteered because he was worried that the others might humiliate themselves. He could tell by the stripes on their shoulders that they were only first years. It was most likely that they had never played a game like this before. The game was more difficult than it looked. One would have to be able to keep their concentration at their best while also multitasking. If he could beat everyone from the opponent's side, then there would be no need for anyone else to step in. "Zippy will go first," Zack said. The student approached the metal pole while the rest of the players stepped back a few meters away from the room, just outside the game zone. Zippy was a level 4 ability user. He was the lowest on the other team. 3, 2, 1, level 1 start. The game had started. The top 2 sections of the metal pole started twisting. At first, the machine was incredibly slow, and Zippy was able to block 2 attacks. This continued for a little while. Quinn noticed that only 2 parts of the machine were moving. This was due to the machine only being set at level 1. What Quinn also realized was the other part of the machine would only move once the person placed their hand or leg down. After blocking the attack, if one were to keep their arms up, then the machine wouldn't start until it was able to sense that the arm had gone back down again. 45 seconds had passed. All of a sudden, the machine started speeding up for the last 15 seconds. Zippy's expression changed as a little bit of sweat started running down his face. Beep! 1 minute had passed and the sound of the buzzer had gone off. This indicated he had passed. Zippy let out a big sigh while he wiped the sweat from his forehead. He walked back to his teammates. "Good job, Zippy. If you couldn't even pass level 1, then I was going to ask why you were still hanging around us," Zack said. Zippy held his head down when he walked past the other. He had no response to give. Next was Quinn's team. "Whoa, go on, Pam," Feck shouted while clapping his hands. "It's Sam," Vorden corrected him, slapping his head, and slightly embarrassed as to why he was even with such an idiot. Even though the game had started, Sam didn't look nervous at all. Instead, he was calmly breathing and keeping it steady while blocking all of the attacks. "He's quite good, at least he's been taught well," Vorden commented. Quinn thought the same. Once he concentrated and closed his eyes, he was able to focus on his hearing. When he listened to Sam's heartbeat, he could tell it was stable, unlike the contestant from before. Even during the last 15 seconds, Sam stayed the same. When Sam walked back to the others, they each gave him a high five and congratulated him on a good job. "Pfft, look at them, celebrating when they only passed level 1. They're acting as if they've already won," Zack said in an annoyed tone. It was Zippy's turn once again. This time he was on level 2. On this level, 3 of the different sections started moving. This caused the player to also move up and down, blocking the attacks not only to their head, but also the ones headed towards their body. Zippy was doing well so far, with only 15 more seconds to go. Just like last time, it sped up. In the last quarter, Zippy blocked the first 2 hits and lifted his hand to block an attack to the left of his face, and then another to his right. This was when the others started noticing something wrong. Although the machine strikes weren't all that powerful, if the attack wasn't properly blocked, it would still hurt. It was quite similar to someone giving a soft padded punch, especially since the bars themselves were covered. Yet for some reason, Zippy's hands were shaking. When the 3rd bar swung towards the right side of his rib, Zippy hesitated since he thought back to the words Zack said. His concentration broke, and it ruined his form. His movements became as erratic as he was nervous. This slip-in was more than enough. He was just a split second late in blocking the blow, heading towards his ribs. Beep, beep, beep. Game over. As he walked back to his team, he hung his head in shame. He didn't even bother making eye contact with Zack. Zack, too, didn't say anything to him. It was a stupid mistake someone at their level should never make. In his mind, Zippy wanted to blame Zack for placing too much pressure on him. However, he knew that his words would be pointless. Now it was time for Sam to go again. Just like previously, he dealt with the multiple bars coming towards him with ease. When the game started speeding up towards the end, his breathing was a little quicker, but it didn't matter. His pace was incredible, and it looked like he was playing some sort of rhythm game. Beep. Level 2 completed. Instead of heading back to the others, Sam remained in the game room. This was because of their agreement beforehand. After another member from the opposing side was eliminated, the other one would stay and go on to the next level. Like this, the other team would have a slight advantage. This was how the game worked. For example, Zippy lost for being hit in the ribs. By seeing this, Sam would be able to observe and dodge the same strike. Not that it would have helped much at this stage anyway. Level 3 begin. The machine started once again, and there seemed to be a big jump in difficulty from level 2 to level 3. All 6 of the sections were moving this time. Having just completed the last round, Sam was a little tired. However, he still managed to persevere by blocking each of the bars. When the last 15 seconds came, the machine's speed looked like it almost doubled. Left block, knee raise, right block again, elbow down. Sam thought about every move, but this was his downfall. Before, since he had enough time to think about everything he was doing, it worked out for him. Now that the attacks were too fast, he forgot to breathe as he was too focused on thinking and blocking. And suddenly, he needed to gasp for air. When taking in a deep breath, a bar came swinging out and whacked him in the face. Game over. Sam looked disappointed in himself. He thought he would be able to help out the others more. And yet, he was only able to eliminate a single player from the other team. He realized that playing this time of the game on your own and as a team was a little different. When you were on your own, you could start the same level again while remembering the speed and attack patterns. You could easily get better and adjust to the game's level. It wasn't that Sam couldn't pass level 3, but he would have needed to play it a couple more times before being able to do so. With the team mode, they only had one chance. Each player only had a single life. I'm sorry, Sam said as he walked back to the others. Don't worry about it. I learned quite a bit from watching you, Quinn said, not taking his eyes off the machine. Sam felt like it was all over after realizing the difference between playing as a team and as a single player. He never imagined that they could win anymore. Instead, he started praying to the karma gods, hoping that their opponents would get what they deserve and somehow lose the match. Another student from Zach's team walked forward and started the game. While Sam was busy playing the game, this student had been practicing at the side while trying to match the machine's speed. Now that he had a good idea of what the attacks would be like, everything seemed to work out for him. After the minute had passed, the game was over, and they completed level 3. All right, who's going next on your team? Zach asked them with a sneer on his face. While clenching his hand like a fist like he was getting into a fight, Fex stepped forward. Ha-ha, time to show you how easy this little thing is. Before he could get into the game area, a hand appeared on his shoulder and pulled him back. Let me take this one, Quinn said. For Sam, Zach, and the other teams standing by the sidelines, it came as a surprise for them when they saw who was volunteering. The two people going at it this time were both level 1s. If this was an ordinary team, then Zach wouldn't have thought too much of it. After all, it made sense to allow the weaker one to go first. However, level 1s couldn't be considered weak. They were beyond that. From the beginning, the only two people that the group focused on were Vorden and Sam. They even thought that the other two would have forfeited after knocking them out. Playing against level 1s was just a waste of time. But still, it looked like Fex willingly stepped back, allowing Quinn to take the stage. Vorden, on the other hand, didn't bat an eyelid at the level 1 making his way into the arena. Sam felt that maybe they were letting everyone have a go at the thing, or perhaps allow Vorden more chances to see how the machine worked. Although their chances of winning were slim from the looks on their faces, they hadn't given up yet. Meanwhile, Zach was taken aback by the sudden situation. The very same student who emanated a huge amount of confidence before was still displaying that same amount of confidence right now. For some reason, he felt that it was natural that he tried his best in avoiding eye contact with Quinn. For a moment, he gave in to his urges and looked up. When his eyes met with Quinn's, he instinctively knew that this was a bad idea. A tingling sensation could be felt at the back of his brain. It was almost as if it was trying to burst out of its skull and run away. What's wrong with you, Zach? Get it together! Quinn entered the game zone and took a relaxed stance while in the circle. The others felt like it was all a show. They simply couldn't believe why he was extremely calm. He'll be out in 10 seconds, one of them said. Oh yeah, do you want to bet on it? I reckon 30 seconds for 10 credits, another replied. He should be confident for a reason, right? I think 45, just before things start speeding up. Zach, do you want to get in on this bet? Zach didn't respond to them. Truthfully, he didn't want to tell the others his answer. Something was telling him that Quinn would be able to clear the entire thing. The game began, and the other group was carefully watching the timer instead of Quinn himself. They were all hoping to cash in their winnings. Once the timer went past the 10-second mark, a moan could be heard since one of them lost the bet. The seconds continued to pass by as it eventually crossed the 30-second mark.
I can't believe it!
The game entered the final 15 seconds. Now that all of their bets failed, they decided to look at Quinn. However, as they observed him, they found things to be quite odd. It still looked as if he was just casually standing in the same spot. The bars came swinging at him, and as one of them was about to hit him at the very last second, he would be able to block the attack with his arm. He would retract his limb and then repeat the same thing to the rest of the bars. Watching Quinn do this was painful for Sam's heart. It was as if someone was walking on a tightrope. Every single attack seemed to have been barely blocked at the last second. Sam watched at the very beginning of the round. Even when the machine moved at a slower pace, the attacks still looked as if they were just about to hit Quinn. Because of how things were going, he expected that Quinn would lose in the final 15 seconds. Beep! The sound of the game ending and the level being completed was heard. Sam's prediction was completely wrong. Whoa, will you look at that? He did it! Well, good news, there's no way he's getting past the next one, right, Zach? Once again, Zach didn't respond. What the others failed to realize was that Quinn wasn't even out of breath. He didn't have a single sweat on him. Although the game was only a minute long, with the unusual amount of intense concentration and fast movements, it was still similar to someone doing a sprint. The next participant from Zach's group entered. It was time for level 4 to begin. All 6 compartments started moving at a faster pace. Not only that, but the machine also seemed to be doing more double attacks. It was attacking 2 different places at once. Even though the student was doing well, everyone could tell he was barely hanging in there. When the machine entered the final quarter, the first strike struck his foot, knocking him out of the game. There were now 3 contenders left, including Zach on the other team. Like before, Quinn entered the game and started in a similar way he left things. It even seemed like he never left the game. Quinn continued blocking each strike just before it would hit him. He would lift his limbs to block and simply place them straight back down. The reading on his watch, it has to be fake. Or maybe he's some sort of martial art expert or something. No wonder he's so confident. He's going to complete this, isn't he? Zach's thoughts were screaming in his head. The timer continued going up and entered the final quarter like before. But suddenly, a strange feeling rushed through Quinn's head, and at the same time, an abrupt pain in his stomach. "Not now," he groaned out. 29 of 95 HP. It had been an hour since the last message had appeared. The shooting pains in his body could be felt. Instinctively, Quinn grabbed his head and leaned forward. This resulted in the bar striking him both on the head and stomach simultaneously, thus eliminating him from the game. Game over. Fex quickly rushed out to see if Quinn was okay. He realized what the problem might have been. "Hey, why don't you just rest? It must be tough going through what you're feeling right now. Just leave it to me. I can handle these guys." Upon seeing Quinn lose, it was a relief to Zach. He didn't know what just happened, but someone must have wanted him to win this game. It was clear that Quinn was going to pass it the same way he did on the previous one. "I knew he would eventually lose. It was only a matter of time," the others commented. They misinterpreted the situation and simply thought that the game was too much for Quinn to handle. With Quinn knocked out of the game, it was time for someone from Zach's team to enter again. This time, the person managed to clear the level 4 stage. "Well, who's next?" Zach asked. Fex stood up and took the mantle. This time, he felt someone tug on his sleeve. When he looked down, he noticed it was Quinn. "You're going to do it again, aren't you?" "One of us can go twice, remember?" Quinn said. "Fine," Fex responded, as he sulked his way back to the rest of his team. After feeling like he suffered an unjust loss, he wanted to finish what he started. Since Zach and his group decided to target him and had even gone as far as trying to snatch his newly bought equipment, if anyone was going to show them their place, it was going to be Quinn. When they saw who was walking up to the stage, they all started to laugh. Everyone else apart from Zach, that was. "I forgot about that stupid rule. Why didn't we just make it 4 versus 4? He quietly complained in his mind, but things were too late now. This time, when the game started, Quinn chose to take on a fighting stance. It was the first time he had done so since he started playing the game. Before, he merely treated this game as a type of practice, trying to see how much he could block things before the very last second. Now that he had no second chances and the will to win rose in his heart, he chose to properly block everything. Even before the machine was able to move, Quinn could already hear the sound of each session activating. With the slightest movement from the contraption, Quinn placed his hand out. To the others, it almost looked like he was attacking the machine. Before the bars on each station had the chance to fully move, Quinn had already hit them. The machine would slightly nudge in certain sections, but it never had the chance to perform a full strike. If he was to hit one section of the machine before it even moved, then the game would have been declared a loss for the player. It was done like this so people would stop using this type of tactic. However, the game over sound never appeared. Instead, the beeping sound that indicated a completed stage resounded out. "Who the hell is this person?" Sam muttered out. At the same time, he also wished Nate was here to witness what he had just seen. Not even Nate would have been able to display something so great. "If you were here, Nate, I think you would have found a new person to be excited about." After witnessing such a display, Zach figured out something. If he wanted to win, then he needed to do something drastic. The whole group was silent after what they had just witnessed. Even Fex, who was the closest there in terms of skill and speed, felt like he would struggle at doing what Quinn had just done. That's confirmed it. He was to be evolving to the next level, but how did it grow so fast, and right in front of my eyes? Fex thought. It was strange, because Fex knew that Quinn wasn't in the vampire noble class. They just had a certain feeling about them. He was very close to breaking through to the next stage. However, Quinn was a little strange. Some of his skills, such as speed and strength, were already at the vampire noble level, but he could tell he hadn't evolved yet. Just how was this possible? This was all because of Quinn's unique situation of having the system while being a vampire. He grew stronger by consuming different types of blood. It allowed his stats to go beyond that of a regular vampire. "I'm going to speak to the admin. The machine has to be broken," someone from Zach's group said. The others were inclined to agree that this game was meant to be about blocking attacks, and it looked like Quinn was attacking the machine itself. "Looks like you're not so worried about revealing yourself then," Forden said. "It's not like I displayed any of my abilities. Besides, I doubt anyone would believe their story. Also, do you think they would go around telling people a level 1 user did all this to them?" Quinn replied. One of the students who was already knocked out from the game on Zach's side had gone to the game admin, who worked at the front, to see if the machine was broken. Zach knew it wasn't the case, but anything to stop this bet was a good thing in his eyes. Another person from Zach's team had started the game anyway. If it was broken, they could always just stop and move to a different booth. But as soon as the game started, it became clear that the machine wasn't broken and was working just fine. The students had expected the machine to be broken. The only way to complete the game like that was to hit the target as soon as he saw it moving to count it as a block. Due to him thinking this, he was slightly unprepared, and after just 10 seconds, the student was hit and out of the game. There were now only 2 people left on Zach's team. Quinn walked up to the game once again and started. Zach was looking at him closely, and so was Sam, hoping to see another amazing display of skills. This time there was no such thing, and Quinn just blocked the upcoming attacks from the machine normally. There was a little bit of disappointment from both sides, as the game had ended normally. Quinn was frustrated after what had occurred last time, and to calm himself down he wanted to perform at his peak. After calming down a little, there was no need, so he decided to play the game like normal. The others soon realized once again how impressive this was. The game was set at level 5, yet when Quinn was blocking the attacks, he made them feel like they were watching a game at level 1. He blocked them all so easily. Now that Quinn had passed level 5 on the machine, the 2 remaining students had to pass it as well. Otherwise, they would lose the game. Zach's last teammate walked into the gaming area that had begun. Before, their team was full of confidence, always being the one in the lead, but now they had the added pressure that if they were to lose, then it meant they would lose the game. They were the current underdogs. How the hell did these level 1s put us in this situation? The student thought angrily as he was whacked in both the leg and head and was out of the game. The only one left now was Zach. He clenched his fist and walked up to the gaming area. This was another reason why he had chosen this game, simply because he had played it multiple times before and felt like he was better than the average person. When playing on level 5 previously, there was always a 50-50 chance that he would pass it on his first go. The game had begun, and Zack was fully concentrating on the targets coming towards him. He blocked the attacks with commitment, meeting them before they would fully reach their destination slightly. This meant he was getting hurt by the bars slightly, but he didn't care about that right now. Not hesitating as he blocked every single attack, the sound of the game over was heard to him. "Level 5 passed." The cheering soon stopped, and the smile on Zack's face started to disappear as they saw Quinn confidently walk to the stage once again. They all no longer saw Quinn as the weak level 1, but instead as a monster at the game. Zack wasn't a religious man, but he started to pray to an unknown force, hoping that something would happen. He knew he only had a 10% chance of passing level 6 himself. If they were both to fail, then the game would be declared a draw, and they could both walk out of this pretending nothing ever happened. "Level 6 start." Whack, whack, whack. The sound of the machine hitting against Quinn's body was constantly being heard as he continued to block each shot. While doing so, Quinn was starting to have a bit of fun, imagining multiple enemies trying to attack him. The game was good to practice one's reflexes, but was useless for learning any skill. There weren't many opponents whose attack patterns would be as simple as this, and it also didn't allow for one to practice attacking, using their skills. Still, Quinn was having a lot of fun, and finally was starting to have a bit of sweat on him. As the timer had reached 45 seconds, the smile on his face grew bigger. Seeing this, Zack already had his answer. Quinn was going to finish level 6, and perhaps could even go beyond. If he wanted to do something, he needed to do it now. Keeping his hand down by his side next to his waist, he opened up his palm and faced it towards the machine. He started to do a type of pulling motion, and suddenly the top section of the machine looked almost still. Inside the machine, the mechanism was being widened up as it was held back by a strange force. Zack had the power of magnetism and was holding back a part of the machine. Then, using all his strength, he released as well as pushing forward, causing the top section to swing out at a great speed. What he didn't expect was the force to be too much, the added power of being held back. With a push of full force, it had reached level 6 speed already, and it caused the top part to fling off. A loud crack was heard as the object disconnected from the machine and flew in the air. "What the—" Quinn managed to move out of the way, but at the same time had stepped out of the circle, causing the game over screen to appear. But that wasn't a concern right now, for the flying object was heading straight for Sam. Both Vorden and Fex had predicted something like this would happen after noticing something strange and had already moved out of the way, but for Sam, it wasn't the same. He was too fascinated and focused on Quinn's performance. From where Quinn was, he wouldn't reach Sam in time, so there was only one thing he could do. Flash step! In an instant, Sam could see a strange style of footwork, causing Quinn to look like he almost instantly teleported from one place to another. Still, Quinn was a little far away, swinging out from his hip. He performed a roundhouse kick and knocked the flying object off to the side. It hit the wall and smashed into tiny pieces away from the others. Thankfully, no one was hurt. "Thank you," Sam said. While saying these words, he looked at Quinn deeply, because in that brief moment he realized something. Both of those moves Quinn had displayed, he felt like he had seen them before. The kick was one of normal Earth martial arts. However, it was performed so clean and fast. But the main thing that he was shocked about was the flash steps. He had seen only one person ever perform it before. The flash step was performed by the player known as Bloody Volver. It couldn't be him, could it? Rather than being shocked about nearly being hit by a flying metal object, Sam was far more concerned about the skill he had just witnessed in front of him. The move that he and Nate referred to as the flash step. This was because whenever they saw the move being used, it did seem like the user would suddenly flash into a different spot. More importantly, it was a move that Sam had only seen one person ever perform, the person known as Bloody Volver from the game. However, just because they had only seen one person perform it, didn't mean only one person knew how to. A teacher most likely needed to teach the person the move, and they most likely taught others. One could come up with a skill themselves, but knowing the information about the Bloody Volver they did know, that seemed unlikely. They knew two things about the Bloody Volver. One was that he was from a military school since they had met on the military gaming servers. The second was that the person was a first-year student. Even if Nate was convinced that this, Larry Steele person was the Bloody Volver, the only evidence he was going on was the fact that he had met these conditions as well as used gauntlets as weapons. Still, Sam didn't have much more evidence himself that the person in front of him was the real Blood Evolver. The only way to find that out was to see the person using their ability. The strange red aura, a powerful, unique ability that had been used to defeat many opponents in the game, including himself. That's why Sam wasn't adamant that Quinn was the Blood Evolver. On his wristwatch, it displayed that he was a level 1 user. There was no way such an ability would be deemed so weak. Then another thought had come to him. The red aura ability was something that shouldn't have been in the game. It was an ability that was unable to be selected in the servers. Yet it could still be used for some reason, and the game devs even confirmed it wasn't a hack. Although many didn't believe this, thinking the game devs were just trying to save face. But what if it was true? Maybe this ability was slightly different from how people knew and measured current abilities. If that was the case, then the watches the military used wouldn't be able to register anything. Sam looked at Quinn once more. He wished he could confirm it right now, but he couldn't. Inside the VR game, players created avatars to be used. So from looks alone, there was no way for Sam to tell that this was the same person, and the same could be said for Quinn. So the two were unable to recognize each other. Sam stood there dazed, thinking about these thoughts. "Hey, are you all right, man?" Fex asked. "I know that thing nearly hit you, but you didn't get hurt, right?" Snapping out of his thoughts, Sam replied, "Yeah, I'm fine. I was just shocked, as you said, that's all." A little before the incident had occurred, one of Zach's team members had gone to the admin room to have a look at Quinn's last match, to see if there was an error in the game. When he had arrived, he had asked the admin to check. They pulled up the previous match on video, and both the admin and the student observed the whole 1-minute video. "So the game was broken, right? You didn't count any of the strikes made to the machine?" the student asked. At first, the admin just sat there and remained silent. The student thought he might have been doing some extra checks in the game, but instead, he was looking at it, amazed. In all of his years working, he had watched countless students play the game, but it was the first time he had seen someone do something like this. "He's amazing," the man said. "This game wasn't broken at all. He managed to hit every section, the second they started to move." The question wasn't whether this was possible or not. There were plenty of people who would be fast enough to do something like this. The real problem the man was struggling with was how. If one was to know the exact pattern of attacks and had it memorized, they could do something like this, but the game was random and didn't always perform the same set of actions. Somehow the student was able to see what was about to move before it moved. The man played the video again, and while doing so, a loud crash was heard outside of the room. It was the sound of Quinn kicking the top of the compartment of the machine into the wall. The two of them left immediately to have a look at what was going on outside. The game wasn't quite over yet, at least not in the mind of Quinn and his group. Because Quinn, Vorden, and Fex weren't exactly stupid, they knew something must have happened. The whole machine was acting strangely, and only when it was Quinn's turn, and in its final moments, something happened to the machine. Using his inspection skill on Zach once again, he confirmed that he had a magnetic skill. He must have tampered with the game. "Well, it looks like the machine broke. Good thing no one got hurt, huh? Why don't we just call this one a draw? You keep your armor there, and I'll keep my crystal. It was a fun little game, wasn't it?" When saying these words, Zach's heart was beating faster, and looking at those in front of him, it started beating even more quickly. Not only was Quinn giving him strange stares, but the other two boys next to him were as well. The look in their eyes was no less frightening than Quinn's. "What's wrong with these guys?" Vorden wanted to say something and prepared himself a speech while the others were playing, but when he saw Quinn stepping forward, he realized there was no need for him to say anything. "First, you try to take my armor from me forcefully. Let me guess, it's because you saw we were low levels, right?" Quinn said, lifting and revealing the number on his wristwatch. "Then, you try to pretend to make things fair by playing a game that none of us have ever played before, and when you see we were about to win, you tamper and cheat at the game?" "Cheat?" Zach replied nervously, taking a step back. The others, with Zach, knew that the person in front of them was impressive when it came to hand-to-hand combat, but found it strange why Zach was so scared. After all, he was only a level 1 ability user. If the two of them were to get into a fight, Zach should be able to wipe the floor with him, they thought. Seeing Zach take another step back angered Quinn even more. He didn't know if it was a game or the fact that he had been starving himself for the last 2 days and a half, but he was getting extremely agitated by the whole thing, more so than he would have done. He was ready to snap. "Stand still!" Quinn shouted in an aggressive voice. For some reason, Zach's body seemed to no longer be in control. He tried his best to move the muscles in his legs. He screamed at his brain, demanding to move his legs to get away from this person. But nothing was working. He was frozen in place. Quinn didn't realize what he had just done, that he had activated the influence skill on its own without using his system, something he had never achieved before. Zach could do nothing as he watched the glowing red eyes of the student in front of him. The others were a little too far to see what was genuinely happening. They stood outside the booth and were watching from both sides. One side with Quinn's group on the left, and the other side with Zach's group. Each of their teams stood behind their teammates, which meant Quinn had his back facing against Fex. So even with his excellent eyesight, he didn't know what was going on and was unable to see that the influence skill was currently active. Quinn had never even thought about using the influence skill to get rid of this whole matter. Zach, being a level 6 ability user, usually meant one would have a strong mind and willpower. This wasn't always the case, but more so than not. In the past, something like this would have never worked. However, two things had changed since the last time. The first is that Quinn had increased his charm points quite a bit. The second was due to the pressure and frightening things that had happened so far. Zach's mind was very unstable. He didn't quite know what was going on, and because of this, the influence skill had a great effect. "You're going to leave that crystal behind and leave this place," Quinn ordered. At that moment, Zach obediently followed, pulling the intermediate crystal from his pouch and placing it on the floor. Soon after, he already left, and the others followed. "Well, that went a lot smoother than I thought it would," Fex said. After picking up the crystal and placing it in his pocket, his mood had calmed down, and his eye color had returned to normal. "Well, that was fun, wasn't it?" he said, facing the others. Seeing this, Vorden felt like Quinn was acting a little bipolar. Just moments ago, his voice sounded like he would snap Zach's head apart, but now he seemed to be over the moon. However, Vorden didn't say anything, as he wasn't the one to talk about a person having mood swings. Just then, the admin man had entered the room. The other student had left to join the others when he saw Zach and them going. "What happened?" the man said with his hands held above his head. The top part of the machine was smashed to bits. It was beyond repair. A whole new machine would need to be ordered. "We should have told those guys to stay behind," said Fex. "Now we're going to get the blame and have to pay for this." The man was about to tear them a new one. He told the kids how they should respect the property that wasn't owned by them, but when seeing the large number in the room, indicating which booth this was, he quickly realized it was the same one from the video. "Did you do this?" the man asked, looking at Quinn. The video that was shown was from the top right. In the video, one was unable to see the face, but could see all the actions performed. The only thing that could be seen as the black curly hair. "Yes, it was me," Quinn replied. "No, you idiot! Why do you have to be so honest? Just say it was the others who ran away," Fex said. "They have the incident on video anyway," Sam said. "On the video, there will be no proof that the others did anything, and would just show Quinn kicking the top part, so it's best not to lie." The students stood there worried for Quinn. The man was quite large, and they were afraid of the consequences they might have to face. "If you need to, I can pay for the machine," Vorden offered. "I can chip in as well," Fex added. "Me too," Sam replied, feeling a little awkward if he didn't offer as well after everyone else had done. But he wasn't rich like the others, and didn't want them to take him up on his offer. The man looked at Quinn. If he was the one in the video, it was expected that something like this might have happened. "You have good friends. Accidents like this can happen. Don't worry about it, and don't let it happen again," the man said. They were shocked at the response, but decided to try to leave as soon as possible and not argue back with the results. There was a good chance that the man might change his mind, so they quickly decided to leave the place. "Make sure I don't see you here again," the man shouted at them with a smile. The four boys were back out at the platform, and the night sky was now fully out. The stairs could be seen above them, and they looked beautiful. Most of the students who were on the platform before had already headed back to their hotel to get some sleep. Although there was no curfew, students were expected to watch the matches that started early in the morning. The group continued to walk in a circle on the platform and reached Sam's hotel. Before parting ways, Sam wanted to get as much information out of Quinn as possible. "You were skillful back there. I can't believe what you did. "You know, I feel slightly embarrassed now that I offered to help you when you didn't need it," Sam said, laughing. "Don't worry about it," Quinn said. "You offered to help even though you didn't know us. In this world, there aren't many who would do that." "If you don't mind me asking, how did you do that with the machine earlier? How can you move so fast? Is it something to do with your ability?" Sam asked. Quinn thought a bit about what to say before answering, but he knew he couldn't take too long, otherwise Sam would get suspicious. Still, he didn't see Sam as a bad person, but still couldn't tell him the truth. "I don't have an ability. That's why it shows I'm a level 1. Because of this, my parents trained me on how to fight since I was young. I focused just on using martial arts. I thought if I got good enough and got some decent beast gear, then maybe I can still make it in this world," Quinn explained. "He's getting better at lying. I don't know if that's a good thing, though," Vorden thought. With that, the group continued to talk for a bit before parting ways. Sam headed back to his hotel room, while the others continued to walk to their hotel. "Saying one has no ability is a good way to hide your actual ability. It's a shame you won't be participating in this tournament, Quinn. It would have been able to see you up against Nate," Sam thought. Although he couldn't confirm Quinn was the Blood Evolver, he didn't need to. The main thing was that Sam felt like he had got on well with Quinn. If he were the Blood Evolver, it would only make things more interesting. There was no rush on his end. There was still a week left to try to find out the truth. Back at the gaming area, the admin who had let Quinn and his group go was in the camera room. He had finished cleaning up the bits and pieces and had closed off the booth to be used by the public. Inside the room, he watched Quinn's video fighting against the level 4 machine again. Every time he watched, he got excited. He also further watched what had happened after the events, seeing that Quinn had saved his fellow teammate and kicked the machine out of harm's way. "I was right to not blame them for what happened," he thought. Still, there was another reason why the man had let them go without paying for anything. The video had been cut down, only showing Quinn's actions during the level 4 game. Then, once the video file was downloaded, the man went into one of the students' internal video sharing platforms and clicked upload. A bar started to fill the screen, and the number eventually reached 100%. "This video doesn't deserve only to be seen by me," the man said. Soon, all the students in the military base would see Quinn's amazing feat. Arriving at the arena, Silver felt better than she had done in a while. It had been a long month at the Academy military base. She wished to return home but would never do so until she had completed her task. Now that it felt like she was drawing close, her mood was starting to change. As she left the hotel room to head outside, she passed many of the students she had taught. "I hope you have a good day, miss." "Stay safe." "I wish I look as pretty as her when I grow up." The students couldn't help but praise Miss Silver. Although she had been strict in class, her lessons were quite knowledgeable. Her lessons were also enjoyable, as it seemed like when Silver taught, she had no filter. When speaking, she would never sugarcoat her words like the other teachers. In the middle of her class, the boys would often compliment her or ask her about certain subjects. When replying, she would do so bluntly, embarrassing them and speaking what was on her mind. As days went on, the students started to learn what Silver was like, and realized she meant no harm from her words. At first, she found the compliments annoying, but over time, she grew to enjoy the words. "When I go back, will Father praise me for doing a good job?" she thought. Everything she had done so far was for the family, and she would continue to do so. Yet not even once had her father, the family leader, praised her, unlike here where she heard kind words every day. Before she knew it, she had already left the arena and was just outside on the ground floor. It was a habit for her to want to be alone whenever she got upset. Usually, a few moments later, and her idiot of a brother, Fex, would come and cheer her up. After she had calmed down, she planned to head back into the arena and search around on the top floor to see if she could find any information or maybe even spot Fex. The quicker she brought him home, the less time she would have to spend here. However, a strange, sweet smell had reached her nose, one she was familiar with but hadn't smelt in a long time, the smell of blood. Wondering why she would smell the scent of human blood outside, she quickly rushed over to the scene. Eventually the trail of blood led her to a bald man with a sword by his side. When she saw that no one was hurt, she slowed down her stride and started to walk. The smell was still coming from the direction of the man, and that's when her eyes were glued onto a particular object he held in his hand. It was a metallic flask, but not just any flask. A flask that bore the symbol of the Sanguinist family. Knowing that Fex was at one of the academies, her mind instantly thought the flask belonged to him. The question was, why was this man holding on to Fex's flask that was filled with blood? From his scent alone, she could tell he wasn't a vampire. "Where did you get that flask?" Silver asked. Leo tried to see if he could recognize the voice, but it was not one he knew. He was quite new to the military, so he still hadn't memorized all of the other generals and sergeants' aura or voices either. But if one was able to get into this facility, he had to assume they were a member of staff. Yet, the first question she asked when meeting him was about the flask. Judging by the tone of her voice, she had to be either someone of equal rank or someone above. No student would dare talk to a sergeant like this.
"Who are you?"
Leo asked.
"State your name and rank."
Although Leo had spoken, the words didn't process through Silver's mind. She was too concerned with her question. Fex would have never let something so precious fall into the hands of another unless something serious had happened. Did the humans find out about him and kill him? Regardless, the flask was an important piece of equipment that could link the humans to them. She needed to get rid of it. Flicking out one of her fingers, a small piece of string shot out straight, aiming for the flask in Leo's hand. Not wanting to cause a scene, she would take the flask and try to find out more later. The piece of string was so thin, and it was dark outside, making it practically invisible. But before the string could even reach the flask, a slicing sound was heard, and then a short click followed after. The piece of string then fell onto the floor. When looking at Leo, she could see the flask had now been put away into his side pouch, while his hand was on the hilt of his sword. "You cut the string, but how did you see it?" she asked, shocked by what had just happened. But Silver wasn't the only one shocked. He was surprised that the girl was also able to see him move his sword so fast.
"I didn't,"
Leo replied as he pointed to his eyes with his other hand.
"Can't you tell? I'm blind."
Leo expected at least a chuckle from Silver. Usually, these types of words would at least give him a response. Instead, Silver stood there still like a statue. Not even her expression had changed. When checking out her aura, there wasn't even a little flicker, and still, her aura seemed to be masked. "If you're blind, then I don't have to worry about you seeing my face," she said as she dashed forward. Withdrawing his sword from his sheath, a large pressurized air slice came out from the sword. Sensing the strong power that was just unleashed, Silver knew she needed to do something about it. One moment she was directly in front of Leo, the next she was behind him. Silver struck towards his chest, thinking the whole thing would be over, but as if Leo had eyes on the back of his head, he was able to dodge by ducking down. He then pivoted his foot, spinning his body around while throwing out his blade towards the middle of her body. This time the attack was too fast for her to move. Instead, at just the right time, she opened up her palms and slapped at the sword from the bottom and the top. Using all her strength, she was able to stop the sword just in time. The sword was held in her hands, just a few inches away from her body. From the outside, it looked like neither one of them was moving an inch. But the truth was, they were both using their full strength, but the power was equal, not allowed the other one to budge.
"Is this her natural strength?" Leo thought. "I've even activated the beast armor underneath my clothing, and still I can't overpower her."
From Leo's ability, he was able to tell if his opponent had high-level beast gear that was currently activated to enhance the user's strength. There was a possibility that the opponent he was fighting against was able to mask their equipment as well, but it was unlikely. The stalemate continued for a while, but both knew this was useless.
"Your voice sounds pretty. If it sounded as good as you looked, I might let you win this one,"
Leo said, hoping to break her concentration for just a second. However, it didn't seem to work. Instead, her eyebrows and face started to scrunch up. She started to concentrate even more, and the top of her forehead started to sweat a little. Silver hadn't run out of options. She still had her many vampire abilities. The problem was quite a few of them required her to look into her opponent's eyes, and that didn't quite work well against Leo. Other than that, the blood abilities would be a dead giveaway and would leave behind a trace. Instead, she chose to push her body even further, ever so slightly. With one of her hands, she carefully positioned her fingers now, so it was held both on top and under the blade. Then, slowly with her other, she let go. Now, Silver was holding back Leo with a single hand, but she knew she couldn't do this for long. With her other hand free, quickly she started to twirl her fingers, and multiple strings started to shout out. The target wasn't Leo himself, but instead they were heading for his pouch. The first set of strings lifted it open, while the next grabbed onto the flask. After slightly moving her finger like a web, she was able to draw it into her hand. "Don't make me come back to kill you," she said, as she quickly fled the scene at an amazing speed. Leo prepared himself to perform another quick set of slashes. If he threw out multiple strikes now, there was a chance one of them could hit her and slow her down. Midway through his attack, though, he stopped himself.
"She couldn't have come all this way just for that. It seems whoever owned that item is quite important."
From the location of where the flask was found and the story of the other students, he could tell that the flask most likely belonged to one of them. He had planned to return it at one point, but not until he found out the flask's use. He never did in the end, but now he felt like he had a more interesting tale to follow. While running back to her room, Silver looked at her hand and could see a cut. "That human hurt me." The first day had passed, which meant it was finally time. It was time for the first day of events. The schedule was like this. Each day, the first round for every category of event would happen. Several smaller events would take place at the same time. In comparison, the three main events would be shown one by one. On the top platform, where all the students were, there were several screens spread throughout the arena, with a number on the side. Each student was handed a pamphlet at their hotel, which indicated the schedule of events that would be displayed on several screens. The top platforms would also be available to the public during this time. This meant that those who had arrived from other planets and factions could also keep a close eye on what was going on. When the main events were to be shown in the afternoon, all the screens would change to focus on them, and the public would have to watch the events directly in the arena. Underneath the arena, most of the participants had woken up early. The first events didn't start until closer to midday, but still, the nerves and excitement got the better of them, and nearly everyone had woken up early. The sleeping quarters for the events were just as nice as the hotel, but were set out differently. There was only one floor, and each of the rooms was next to each other, but they had the basics for everyone: a computer, a bed, a toilet, and a shower. The computer was there so the students could still enjoy their free time and research whatever doubts they had, while also updating themselves about the ongoing news. It would also allow them to communicate with other students. The separation was to allow them to focus and to sort out the formalities with all the students taking part in the event. There were a large number of people, and with several military bases taking part, it was easier to communicate and organize things this way. When the event was over, or when a student was knocked out, they would be free to head to the hotel where their military base had its accommodation. Peter, of course, had restricted access compared to the others. There was no computer in his room, and a guard was stationed outside his door during the whole night. When Layla had left her room in the morning, she went out and started to head to the target practice area. While walking, her legs were a little wobbly, and she had quite the bags under her eyes. Her body felt weak, and the energy was drained from her. One wouldn't expect this type of reaction from some of the participants, as they cared for an event like this. But for Layla, this was not the case. She had no reason to care for the tournament. Win or lose, it didn't matter. Her life was already predetermined. She wasn't going to get good grades and join the military or a faction after this. She couldn't even become a solo traveler if she wanted to. This became more apparent to her last night, and this was the real reason why she felt like this. Last night she had hardly gotten any sleep. When entering her room, she had prepared to have a nice rest. She had made a warm bath and placed the right amount of bath salts and solutions into the tub. She had never experienced pampering like this, and just wanted to enjoy it for once. However, fate was quite cruel to her. The sound of a message being received was heard on the computer. "That's strange. I didn't sign into anything, right? I don't think I even touched the computer. Maybe the person before forgot to log out?" she said as she started to walk over. However, even the thought of someone forgetting to log out was strange. Technology had come quite a way, and the computer was able to tell who was actually at the computer at the time through the camera. If it wasn't the correct person or the user wasn't seen, it would generally disconnect from whatever it was connected to. Still, this just made Layla even more curious. When she looked at the screen, her heart felt like it skipped a beat. On the computer screen was an envelope with a crest attached in red. It imitated the letters from the old times, when wax was used to seal essential letters. In this case, the seal was used as an angel, with its wings having been removed, falling to the side. It was a letter from Pure. They had their own ways of getting information to their members. Pure, in reality, was a much bigger and more influential group than the government would have liked the public to know. Layla's hand was shaking as she went to select the letter. What could they want now? Do they want me to do something? Maybe even attempt to assassinate someone? Thoughts were running through her head. There were many different tasks an agent needed to do, and she felt quite lucky when they told her to just gather information about the academy as she saw fit. The letter could very well be her first real mission. Eventually, she plucked up the courage and clicked on the letter. The digital screen imitated the seal being open, and the contents of the letter were shown. Agent 100, you have been ordered to lose and drop out of the tournament as soon as possible. The contents of the letter were short, and it didn't expand on instructions or even explain why. It was merely telling her to purposely lose her next match. Her bath time was ruined, and her whole night for that matter. The task was an easy one, and she was thankful for that. She wasn't going to try in the event anyway. Still, she couldn't help but wonder why it was so important for her to drop out of the event. The only thing it would allow her to do was to return to the other side. Are they planning an attack? This dreaded thought had now chilled her mind. If they weren't planning an attack, they were planning something big. Every year this event took place, and so far they had never targeted it. It was expected at some point they would, and this might very well be the year. Having arrived at the target practice area, Layla started to notice something strange. The other students seemed to be huddled up in groups and were talking about something. She was able to catch a few words here and there, and she had also expected them to be talking about their upcoming events. Hey, did you see that video? Yeah, it went viral pretty quickly. Do you think you could do that? Are you crazy? It must be fake, right? But it happened here. It was one of the students from the bases. Look at the date and timestamp, and even in the description they mentioned what had happened. That's what I don't understand, though. This person was a skilled fighter, but if this happened yesterday at the arcades up top, then that means he isn't a participant in any of the events. Even if he had a weak ability, there is even a martial arts event. Heck, there's an event based on this very game, so why didn't he join? Without any context to what the students were talking about, Layla was perplexed and was quite curious as well. That's when she heard her name being called out from behind. Hey, Layla! Logan shouted. Do you have a second? As soon as Logan left his room, he started looking around to try to find Layla, trying to see if she had heard or seen the video herself. Standing upright, trying to make herself look energized, Layla turned around. What's up? Judging by your not saying anything, I guess you haven't seen it. Logan then placed his hand out, and the little spiders from his suit started to detach themselves, until eventually they formed a small screen and tablet. The video was a recording of one of the gaming booths from the top left corner. The student was angled, and the camera was positioned slightly behind, so one could see the machine as well as the student's fast hand movements. What was shown was a student being able to clear a level 4 game, while the machine itself looked like it hadn't moved an inch. Layla had tried one of these machines before and could see how impressive it was. In the video, the figurehead had been altered and blurred thanks to the uploaders wanting to keep the person's identity secret. It's cool and all. No wonder everyone is talking about it. But why did you want to show it to me so badly? Layla asked. Logan then gave a command to his little spiders to alter the video. The blur from the person's head was removed, and now curly hair with pale skin could be seen. It was still hard to see the student, but for those who were around him a lot, she could tell who it was. It was Quinn. What the hell is he doing? She asked. The video had already spread around, and it looked like many in the room were now talking about it. The feat itself wasn't so impressive, but the fact that a student of their age was able to do such a thing was. In the game, no abilities could be used, and some were even beginning to think the person in the video must have had some type of speed ability. However, gaming systems usually had some countermeasure against abilities being used in this type of place, and this was no exception. Due to the event not allowing the use of abilities, trackers and such were invented to see when MC cells were activated in a specific area. It was the same type of technology that was used in the watches. Although the game couldn't stop the use of abilities, it could detect if someone was using them or not. The video had come from someone who had full control of the video system that day. It would be silly for them to upload a fake video, but not impossible. Right now, Layla wanted to confront Quinn and have a go at him, trying to think just what was going through his head at the time, but it was impossible. "Don't worry about it so much," Logan said. "I just wanted to make you aware. I plan to lose my matches as soon as possible and try to help out Quinn when I am above. The video blurs out his face, but anyone interested enough would be able to do what I did. Not that I think they could tell it was him, but I think we should be prepared just in case." Layla nodded in response, and the two of them parted ways as Logan went off to the training area in his section. What Logan said had reminded Layla of the task that had been given. She too was meant to lose the match as quickly as possible. With a lot on her mind, she took out her beast bow and placed an arrow in from her quiver that was attached down the side of her leg. There were multiple targets, all different distances away. They would continually pop up and pop down at random intervals, making it hard for one to get the pattern. Letting go of the arrow, it flew out quite fast. Just as the arrow was about to hit one of the targets, she held it in place with her ability. When the target popped back up again, she allowed it to go forward and hit. The event Layla was in allowed her to use her abilities. She didn't know if that was a good thing or a bad thing, considering how weak her abilities were. If it were an event like this one, where the goal was just to hit the targets, then she would do pretty well, or at least not horribly. The students were told what they needed and what they were allowed to bring, but the finer details would only be revealed once the event started. This way, none of the students were able to prepare an unfair advantage beforehand. Layla continued to hit targets in this fashion. She didn't do anything fancy, and just hit them slowly, one by one. She just wanted to do a repetitive task, to focus and clear her mind right now. One of the arrows had left and was floating about. She held the arrow still in place once again, waiting for the target to pop up and hit it. But when the target popped up again, another object went flying past her arrow, hitting the target before she could even do anything. "Sorry, I didn't realize you were after that one," a girl said. As she turned her head, she saw a long-legged, straight blonde-haired girl standing by her side. She too had a bow in her hand, although it looked a lot more impressive than hers, perhaps at the advanced tier. Next to her were two more students, a boy and a girl who looked like a pair of brother and sister. They both had the same short hair parted off to the side. The girl had what looked like a giant version of a slingshot on her back. In contrast, the boy had several small tomahawks. Layla decided to ignore what had just happened and continue doing what she was doing. Once again, she fired her arrow, hitting some targets. Then, when she needed to hold the arrow in place, to wait for the target again. The same thing had happened. Another object pierced the target she was about to hit. This time laughter from her side could be heard, and it was from the same group of people again. This annoyed Layla, but she knew it was best to be the bigger person and moved over a little to a different part of the targeting section. When she fired her arrow again, before it could even reach the target, something came out from the side, knocking her arrow and snapping it in half. Still, she knew she was the bigger. "What the hell are you guys doing?" she snapped at them. "I'm sorry," the girl in front said. "It's just your arrows were moving so slowly, we thought they were targets to hit as well." Annoyed by her words, Layla readied her bow, and this time placed 3 arrows inside, shooting them at 3 different targets at the same time. The female quickly followed with the same, and shot 3 arrows after Layla's. The speed of the arrows was far greater than hers, and knew they would soon catch up. She was expecting this after seeing the weapon being used was better than hers. She decided to use her ability to throw the arrows off course, but just as she was about to finish her thought, the arrows from behind also moved direction, changing the path, and had hit them, causing them to fall to the ground. The women started to walk over to Layla. "It makes me sick to think someone has the same ability as me, yet is at such a low level and has come to participate in the same event as me," the girl said. "If people were to see your poor skills with the bow, they'll start to think my ability is useless, making it harder for me in the future. Let me give you a piece of advice. Just drop out of the event, don't fire a single arrow, and give up. Even if you tried, you would come in last place anyway." Layla wanted to say something back, but the girl had already started walking away, and for some reason, the sick feeling in Layla's stomach was felt once again. It felt like recently everyone was telling her to give up on the event. "Is it because everyone thinks I'll lose even before trying?" she thought. Layla wasn't as weak as she thought. Although her ability was level 2, her fighting sense was at a high level. In some cases, she would fare well facing level 3 or 4 students, as long as they didn't have a high-level beast gear on. But as she started hanging around with the others, she began to feel useless. And even now, others who had never met her before assumed her as useless baggage, and even the organization she was in. Instead of informing her of the plan they had, or giving her a critical mission, they were telling her to hide and run away.
"Prove them wrong,"
a deep voice said from behind. When she turned around, she could see a reasonably bulky, square-headed man. It was someone else she had never met before, and wasn't in her event, so she was wondering just what he was doing here.
"The best way to shove it in the people's faces like them is to prove them wrong. And when you see their faces, treasure that moment because that's the best feeling," the student said with a sadistic smile on his face. It looked like he had the experience of doing this himself at some point. The important thing was, though, that Layla thought what this student was saying was right. Screw them all, she thought. So what if everyone thought she was going to fail in the tournament? The only thing she could do now was to prove them wrong. All she wanted to do now was at least pass the first round of events. She would show them, and everyone watching, from wherever they were hiding. "Thanks for cheering me up, she said, trying to guess the student's name. She had the urge to call the boy Blocky based on his appearance, but felt it was a bit rude after he had been so nice to her. "The name's Nate," he said, helping her before she crushed his feelings. "I was wondering if you could help me. You don't know a student by the name of Larry Steele, do you?" he asked. "It looks like she had no clue who Larry Steele was after all,"
Nate said as he continued to look around the room. Nate was hoping that perhaps someone as skilled as the Blood Evolver would be well known, to the point where if he went around asking others from the same military school, they would have instantly recognized the name. This was why he continued to go about asking students from other military factions if they knew of the person named Larry. So far, there was no success. Out of all the students who were preparing for their events, the students taking part in the fighting tournament were the most cautious. Everyone there was trying their best to hide their abilities, and instead was doing some other form of training. This was because if one knew the other person's ability before fighting them, it would be a big advantage. With nothing else to do, all Nate could do was wait for the first round of the tournament. There, no one would be able to hide their abilities anymore. "Hey, Larry, how are you doing, bro?" a student's voice from behind was heard. Instantly, Nate turned around, hearing the name Larry. A medium-sized male student stood behind him, and looking at his uniform, he could tell he was a first-year student.
"This has to be him,"
Nate thought. Inching his way closer, Nate started to perform some lunges near the area. He did this so he wouldn't look so suspicious when coming toward a group of people, and it also made sense since he was in a fighting tournament. The two students, Larry and his friend, were busy talking away when from the corner of their eyes, they could see what looked like to them an idiot performing lunges. It was clear that for whatever reason, the person was trying to get closer to them. "Can I help you?" Larry asked, not being able to take the awkwardness anymore. He felt embarrassed for the student.
"Oh, don't mind me, I'm just warming up for the fighting tournament,"
Nate replied, after switching legs and lunging his way closer to them again. Ignoring the strange man, the group started to move away. It looked like his plan had failed. Seeing that his brilliant idea didn't work, he decided to just continue practicing while looking at the two students. The two of them started to practice together, sparring and performing kicks and punches. It didn't look bad, but it didn't look impressive either.
"So you're hiding your skills, huh?" said Nate. "Don't worry, when you go up against me, you can use your full strength." "No, I'll make you use your full strength." Nate then started laughing to himself loudly as he thought of the upcoming fight, a rematch between him and the Blood Evolver. It was morning, and Quinn had trouble sleeping through the night. Every hour or so he would be woken up by the dreaded pain as his health continued to go down. 21 of 95 HP. It was important to keep going for now, as he needed to curb the addiction away. Sooner was better than later, and then he would be able to get stronger once again using the different blood types. The event was the perfect time to do this, as there were far too many people all over the place for him to do anything in secret anyway. Before leaving the room, Quinn had placed his newly obtained armor into his dimensional space. After he decided to test out everything was working, as it should have done, and used his new skill Shadow Equip.
The boots, the chest piece, and his gauntlets all appeared at once. Status, level 18, 10,750 of 25,600 EXP, 21 of 95 HP, strength 23 plus 7, agility 26 plus 5, stamina 19 plus 1, charm 24 plus 1, defense 27. As the item description said, the chest piece added a stat point to each one of his different stats and also increased his defense. It was a shame that none of the equipment he had also came with an active skill like the boots. However, he knew this was rare and hard to come by. There was still a lot of EXP to be obtained before reaching level 20, the next step for Quinn in his vampire evolution. It would be difficult now since there were no more planned expeditions for the year to other portal planets. This was the easy way for Quinn to gain experience by defeating beasts for the first time. If he was to fight some strong opponents in the tournament, though, perhaps it would have helped him, but he knew that was near impossible. Quinn was still registered as the substitute, but it felt like something in name only. It was unlikely Peter would be able to escape from whatever they had planned. He also looked at his inventory where the intermediate crystal could be seen. It was just the item he needed to create a short sword from the shop. When he got back, he planned to craft the gear and hand it over to Vorden. It was a good weapon, but wasn't quite compatible with him using his blood skills, such as hammer strike or blood spray. He also thought it would be good for Vorden to have a weapon for himself, just in case he didn't have a good ability on hand to use. To the left of his bed on top of the drawer was a little pamphlet. It continued the schedule of events for the day and what was being shown where. There was around an hour left before the first set of events had started, and Quinn was wondering which one he should go to. After looking at the long list, apart from the 3 main events, none of them seemed too interesting for him. While scrolling through the list, he managed to spot one called Block Block. He seemed to remember that the game he had participated in yesterday was called the same thing. Is it an event to do with the game yesterday? He recalled playing and seemed to have quite some fun with the machine. Perhaps it was something he could enjoy watching before the main events. Knock, knock. Hey, Quinn, move your... Let's go! Feck shouted through the door. Putting his equipment back into the dimensional space, he took the pamphlet with him and answered the door. Hey, where's Vorden? Quinn asked. I don't know, I came to get you first, Fex replied. When looking down the hallway, they spotted Vorden coming toward them. Sorry about that, I had some things to deal with, he said, smiling. Any ideas on what you want to see? Fex asked. I was thinking about this. Quinn pointed to the block event, and the others were fine with it. Just like him, they were not interested in anything apart from the main events anyway. When the 3 boys left the hotel, the outside area was vastly different from before. It was a nice sunny day, and the sky was blue with hardly any colors inside. It was the perfect day to have an event like this on. Seeing the sun, though, gave Quinn the chills. The ring protected him now from the sunlight's effects, but it was as if his mind naturally started to react to the fact the sun was too bright. Maybe a placebo effect that the sun still affected him in some way. On the top platform, it was filled with both students and members of the public, unlike yesterday. Nearly all the stalls were busy, and people looked to be having a good time playing games and eating food and such. I almost forgot that it wasn't just the military watching this event. When Fex said these words, he realized something. This might also be the perfect time for them to send someone after him. He knew how good their information gathering was, and they should have known where he was by now. In a way, being at the military base where no one knew where they were was a good hideout for Fex. But in a place like this where it was open to the public, it was only a matter of time before he would be taken back. He looked at Quinn, and Vorden walked off into the crowd of people, heading towards the events. I might have to say goodbye to you soon, he mumbled as he quickly followed after the 2. Walking around on top of the arena was a bit harder compared to the other day. It was bustling like a city center with a sale on the weekend. A big event that attracts people from all over, Vorden said. Luckily, the platform was quite large and wide, allowing plenty of space for the vast amounts of people to move around. At the moment, most of the people were gathered around the screens that were stationed ever so often along the circular path. They were now turned on and were displaying the starter events for the day. The block event that the group wanted to go to was stationed on screen 7. While walking by, they managed to catch a few events on the other screens. On one of the screens, there was a soccer match going on that allowed the use of specific abilities. There were complicated rules for which abilities were allowed and not allowed for this event. It seemed quite hectic and was hard to follow along, but after the introduction of soccer ability, normal soccer just seemed boring to watch. On the next screen they passed, there were giant pillars as tall as a house. The students were told to use their abilities and craft the most beautiful object they know. It was such a joyous day, and the atmosphere around them was great. Usually on a day-to-day basis, Quinn would have someone throw an insult or a slur at him, but everyone was far too focused even to notice him or the others there. He felt guilty that he wouldn't be able to enjoy the events that were going on since he had Peter in the back of his mind. Even if he knew why they decided to do this to Peter, he still didn't know what they would do after, nor could he do anything. He wasn't able to get strong enough in time and hoped that after using Peter as bait, Logan thought they would allow Peter to live at school a bit longer, but before moving him on to trial. In that time frame, Quinn would try to get as strong as possible and save him. Eventually, they had finally reached screen 7, and there was already a large crowd in this section. It was the largest crowd compared to all the other screens. At first, it was mostly filled with just students, but later on, adults and others from different factions came to take a look, since they were too wondering why the event was so popular. "I didn't know Block was such a popular game," Quinn said. "It isn't," Borden replied. "I never expected there to be this many people." The group walked through some of the people who were at the back, not paying attention until they eventually found some seats around the middle area. There were seats for those who wanted to stay and watch the event permanently in front of every screen. Then there were standing areas toward the back and sides for those who might want to continue to walk around and see the other events. Most people preferred to stand. That way they could go to the stands or watch the other events and come back to the ones they enjoyed first. But because Quinn and the others didn't want to watch anything else, they were happy just to sit down. "Sorry," Quinn said as they passed a man that they didn't have any military uniform on and sat in the 3 seats next to him. The man was sitting at the very end of the row. After sitting down and watching the event for a while, they realized how boring a game it was to watch rather than play. The game was currently at level 3, and they needed to witness multiple students do the same thing again and again, clearing the same level. It wasn't an exciting atmosphere like last night, and there were even a few in the crowd starting to yawn. "I think we might have made the wrong decision to trust you to pick the event," Fex said, yawning himself and stretching his arms. "I'll go get us some drinks and snacks. You guys can wait here," Borden said as he left his seat. "Don't worry," the man sitting next to them said as he brushed his long hair that went down to his collarbone away and placed them behind his ear. "Although the beginning is a bore, this type of game gets better in the later rounds," he said with a smile. The man had beautiful clear skin and didn't look a lot older than 20. Both Fex and Quinn didn't know what to say, so they just smiled back at the man and carried on watching the event. What he said was true, Quinn thought. The later rounds would be far more exciting, and he would love to see others perform at a level beyond 5. As the levels went up, more students started to get knocked out. It didn't seem like it was because they couldn't do it, but instead was due to the event's nerves and pressure. They had made silly mistakes at crucial times. The atmosphere was still tame. However, that all seemed to change when they announced they would start to move on to level 4. The audience members seemed to perk up and started chatting heavily among themselves. "Is there something big that happens when it reaches level 4? Fex asked. "Not that I can remember when we played yesterday. It was the same, right, even up until level 5. It just got faster and the attack patterns changed slightly," Quinn replied. The man sitting next to them had overheard their conversation. "Oh, so you managed to bet the game at level 5. I might say that's quite impressive. What's your top level?" the man asked. "I don't know," Quinn replied. "We stopped playing after level 5. We were only playing because of a bet anyway." Borden soon returned with the drinks and snacks, and by now a few students had already passed and were knocked out by the level 4 machine. Then, when the next participant started, he did something that seemed odd. Instead of blocking the attacks, it looked like he was trying to hit the machine as soon as it moved. The students had gone wild after seeing this. "Is it him? So he was at the event after all," a student shouted. But soon after, he had made a mistake and had hit the machine before it even moved. "Fake!" another shouted. "I guess he couldn't be in the tournament, especially if he were in the video. It happened here on the top floor, remember?" another said. Quinn and Fex, with their hearing, were able to overhear the students talking. While hearing what they were saying, they looked at each other, unsure about what was happening. They didn't say a word, but had a dreadful feeling in the back of their minds. The game continued with several other students attempting to do the same thing. They were hitting the machine as soon as it moved to make it look as if it was standing still. In the end, not a single student was able to achieve it, and even the favorite to win the competition was knocked out. The man who was sitting by their side was finding the whole thing strange. He had watched the event multiple times in the past years, but had never seen anything like this happen, nor the level of excitement coming from the other students, nor the strategy the participants were using. "Can I ask," the man said to the student sitting in front of him, "why are they all attempting to attack the machine like that? Why not just play the game like normal?" "You mean you haven't seen the video?" the student replied. "My guess is the contestants saw the same thing we all did. There's a video of someone playing the game at level 4 who was able to attack the machine before it even moved. He managed to clear the level perfectly, not making a single mistake while doing this." The sound of something hitting the floor and then ice spilling all over the place was heard. When the man turned around, he noticed that the student sitting by his side had dropped his drink. How do they know about the video? Quinn thought. The level 4 event had ended, and since there were not very few participants, the events team needed to do something to fill the time. They decided that they would interview the favorites to win the event. It was quite a shock since most of the participants had been knocked out earlier than planned. On screen, one of the students was being interviewed who went by the name of Kyle. He was the favorite to win the event, but had attempted to do the strange actions and was knocked out in the process. "Kyle, we just wanted to ask, what made you change tactics like that? We saw many here today attempt the same thing you did today, but it seemed like a risky move that didn't pay off," the female interview asked. "This game has become too easy in the past. I knew that if I played usually, I would have had a high chance of winning, but what's the point when most likely the best person in this game isn't even participating? After seeing someone do what seemed like an impossible task, I decided I would try to challenge him in my way. The plan was to emulate what this person had done in a video I saw today. If I achieved that at level 4, I would try to do the same at level 5 and send out a challenge to him. It turns out after attempting and failing at a level 4, I respect this student even more." The screen then went back to the interview, who had a few more words to say. "For those of you unaware, the video Kyle was talking about was uploaded last night. It had become an overnight sensation due to the timing of things and how it was filmed, and done only a day before this very event and at this exact place. The video will be played on the screen now for you all to see." The screen changed once again, and now full on the big screen in front of everyone, the video of Quinn in the gaming booth was then shown. His face was blurred out, but the others, even though it was their first time seeing it, could tell that it was Quinn. The three boys continued to watch the video, which was being played on a huge screen in disbelief. For some reason, that 1-minute video felt like a 3-hour-long movie. All Quinn wanted to do now was run up there and shut it off and erase everyone's memory. "Hey, Quinn, isn't that—" Fex immediately had his hand grabbed over by Vorden and Quinn, who were standing by his side. The two boys then quickly dragged Fex out of the seats as they disappeared out of the crowd. "Fex, are you crazy?" Vorden shouted in a soft but angry voice, knowing that there could still be the others around. The video had now finally stopped playing, and the interviews carried on with the other participants who had attempted the same method. "No one knows it's Quinn, and you were just about to reveal to everyone it was him." The video blurred out Quinn's head, making him unrecognizable. The only thing that could be seen was a blurred person wearing the school uniform. However, Vorden was concerned about whether someone could deblur the video. Would they be able to see the face or not? Unfortunately, Vorden wasn't the right person for things like this, and he wished he could speak to Logan right now and dim his curiosity. Annoyed that he was suddenly dragged away, Fex stepped back a bit and brushed away some of the crumbs of food that had fallen all over him in a rush. "What did you say? No one knows it was him, right? Well, I wouldn't be so sure about that one, because there were 5 other people with us at the time who do know it was him," Fex said. "I don't think that's a problem," Quinn replied. "This video seemed to have already spread, right? If they wanted to, they could have already told everyone. In a normal case, someone would be happy for this to happen. Perhaps there are already people coming forward, even claiming that they were the ones in the video. Zach probably thinks I will do the same, and when I do try to discredit it and ruin my big moment. Still, just to be safe, I think we should go looking for them and try to clear their memories a bit," Fex suggested. "Let's split and search for them. We should have done this yesterday, but I didn't think such a small thing like this would become a big deal.
Damn it! All we did was play a freaking game. The boys agreed it was always better to be safe than sorry, and even if Quinn was right about his thoughts, there was a chance one could change their mind later on, and this small mistake may bring up huge trouble for them. It's best if we split up. We can cover more ground then and find them faster. Use the watch to send a message as soon as you see them, Vorden said. The three boys quickly split and headed off into different directions as they searched for Zack and the others. While this was all happening, the strange man that was seated next to them couldn't help but find all of their actions odd. Everything changed as soon as the video started to play, he noticed. Was one of them in the video? The man thought. Otherwise, it didn't make sense based on the actions and what they were currently doing now. What an interesting bunch of kids, he thought as he chuckled to himself. Just then, another older-looking man approached him from the side. He wore regular plain clothing that didn't make him stand out much. When gaining access to the area, the public, including the students who weren't participating in any events, were told to hand over all of their beast equipment or leave them behind. Sir, the main events will start soon. They're instructed me to bring you and the others to an appropriate place as soon as possible, the old man said, bowing down. Just when I thought I found something more fun to do, the man said as the two of them walked off. Vorden was running around pretty recklessly. Unlike yesterday, there were far too many people to check to see if they could find them. Other than Zack, many of them had pretty unmemorable faces as well. The first area Vorden decided to check was nearby the screen. At least then, he would be able to get someplace high and see from the top if he could spot anyone. Looking around, Vorden was trying to see if there was anywhere high he could get a clear view. Need any help? A voice called over. Sam? Vorden replied as he turned around. The two boys quickly started exchanging information, and Vorden explained what was going on and the reason for the worried look on his face. I already saw the video as well, Sam replied, and you're in luck. You don't have to worry about those guys. Let me explain. Early in the day, Sam had decided to pay a visit to the gaming center and wanted to talk to the admin man who had uploaded the video. There was no one else who had access to that footage, or at least not that part on that particular day. When he arrived, Zack's group was already there trying to get the original video file from the man. After listening in for a while, it turned out that after the video was a big hit, the group tried to get video proof of what the person looked like, or their name. It turns out they had already attempted to reveal to the people who the blurred figure was, but with no name and only the description of curly hair, it was hard for them to believe. In the video, one couldn't even see if the person had curly hair. It went a step further when they mentioned the student had a level 1 ability on his wristwatch. They thought this would have been a standout feature. Instead, it just became a big lie that was unbelievable. In the end, people completely ignored them. After that incident, they were embarrassed to tell others who they thought it was. So instead, they wanted to get the original video file. However, the man in charge was determined not to give access to the video to anyone, and even claimed the file had already been deleted and rewritten over. Now it was impossible to recover. The man only wanted to share the incredible feat, but didn't want the pressure to be put on the student. If Quinn himself were to come here and ask for the original video, he would have given it to him on the spot. With nothing else to do, the group eventually left the place in disappointment. That's when Sam noticed the main culprit from yesterday wasn't there, Zack. The students were coming towards Sam, so he decided to hide and pretend he was doing something else, and tried to listen to their conversation. I can't believe Zack wouldn't come with us, that wimp. I thought he was better than that. I'm telling you, man, after yesterday, he just said he doesn't want any business with that fellow. It's like he was traumatized or something, the students said as they walked past him. After learning about this incident, Vorden's heart started to calm down a little. It was too much sometimes to keep this many secrets in this small group. His own was enough. Knowing that everything was okay, Vorden decided to send a message to both Quinn and Fex to explain the situation. At the same time, Quinn had received the ping he had just found Zack. Using his hearing and a keen sense of smell, he was eventually able to locate him from yesterday. When there were large crowds of people, all he needed to do was repeatedly use his inspection skill until he found the right person. As soon as Zack's eyes met up with Quinn's, he gulped, remembering that strange feeling when he couldn't control his body. He didn't move or run away and just followed Quinn off to the side. When the two of them reached the edge of the arena, Zack constantly looked over the railing. Thoughts ran through his head of the possibilities this crazy person might have done.
He even assumed that his ability might have been mind control. If he could control his body and tell him to stand still, maybe he could also make his look like a... I promise I haven't told anyone, and I won't. I don't even know your name or what military school you're from. From others, I heard no one believed them either, and even they know nothing about you, Zack said quickly. Quinn hadn't even asked anything or used his influence skill, and had already gotten all the information he needed. Why couldn't everything be this easy, he thought. Standing in the middle of the pathway was Fex. He was unmoving, and his watch was continually blinking, informing him he had a message that Vorden had just sent. Multiple people walked past him, but his eyes were staring dead ahead, and he didn't even blink for a second. A few meters away, another figure stood there still. I finally found you, brother. Out on the busy platform, things were starting to settle down a bit. The public, who had been invited to watch the starter events, were being moved out to their seats in the arena. This was because the first main event for the day was about to start soon. With fewer people on the top platform, it was now easier to move and find people. Quinn had quickly met up with Vorden and was surprised to see Sam there with him. They both started to explain the details of what had happened over at the VR gaming center in the morning. After hearing everything was okay, he felt like he could finally relax. Hey, where's Fex? Did you send out a message to him too? Quinn asked. I did, Vorden replied. I sent one out the same time as I sent one to you, telling him our location and everything. I wonder why he isn't here yet. The first main event will start in around 15 minutes. A speaker sounded, informing all of the students, as well as the public, to get ready for the first main event. We'll head back to the screen near our hotel. Just send him another message to meet us there, Quinn said. Wait, aren't you worried about him? Sam asked. What if another group like yesterday approaches him? Sam was a little concerned after what had happened yesterday. He wasn't ignorant of the behavior and actions treated towards low levels. He seemed to remember yesterday that not only Quinn but Fex was a level 1 user as well. If another group of people was to approach him, it could be bad news again without his friends around. Don't worry about him. I can't imagine anyone scaring away that guy, Quinn replied. The group, including Sam, had decided to watch the main event together. Although Sam's hotel was quite far away from theirs, he didn't mind the walk back in the evening. If he were to go back and watch it near his hotel screen, he wouldn't have anyone to watch it with anyway. At least, not until Nate was knocked out of the competition, and he couldn't imagine that happening on the first day. Upon arriving at the screen, things looked a little different from when the events were played earlier on in the day. The screen had moved outward and looked like they were all hovering in the air in the arena. It allowed students to look over the edge and either watch the event from up high in the actual area or see sufficient detail on the screen. Several drones were flying about in the arena, each with a camera attached. It would be used to record as much detail of the events as possible. Most students would decide to watch it via the screen, but it was still nice to see what the real thing looked like from above. The boys decided that they would peek over to see what the first stage of the main event was like. Everything that was out before had been cleared, and right now there were a total of 140 small little raised platforms out. On the platform was a workbench of some sort, with several other items and even a hot furnace behind them. While the others had their eyes glued on the stage, Quinn and both Vorden noticed something else. Inside the arena, there was one section of seats that had been cleared out, and in its place was a very large, luxurious booth. There was see-through glass allowing all the others to see what was inside. Inside the booth were 5 relatively large grand chairs. There were also already several soldiers standing on each side of the room, still like a statue. All of them wore the same beast gear that looked to be of very high quality. It was a standout because not many people in the arena had such beast gear on, as they weren't allowed due to safety precautions. It was natural for not only Quinn, but for those around to pay attention to the booth, and he had a pretty good feeling he knew who those seats were reserved for. Then it looked like the first person had arrived at the special booth. The soldiers in the room didn't bow down like they usually would when greeting a guest of high honor. Instead, they immediately went down on one knee and placed their fist on the ground. As soon as Quinn saw the person, there was no need for an introduction. There probably wasn't a single person who didn't know of this man. He continued to walk past the others, his heavy boots hitting the ground. He looked through the clear glass and adjusted his red-tinted sunglasses. Finally, as he sat down in the middle seat of the 5, his whole face could be seen. On his chin was a little patch of facial hair, and on the top of his head was a full mop of hair that had streaks of gray going through. It was hard to tell if it was dyed due to the pattern, or whether it was just their old age. Once the man was comfortably sat in his seat, the other soldiers stood up in the room and saluted. "We welcome the Supreme Commander." The man sitting in the seat was the Supreme Commander Oscar White, one of the men hailed as a hero during the time of the Great War. When the war started against the Dalki race, the enemy had done something unexpected. When the Dalki first arrived, it was clear they were under attack by a form of higher intelligence. They had better equipment and technology than humans. However, when the humans first saw the appearance of the Dalki, they looked strange and more like that of a wild animal mixed with a human. This caused the leaders at the time to be hesitant, thinking about whether or not these were the real enemy or not. In their naivete, they never expected the Dalki to pull off what they had done. While the main forces were in battle, at the start of the war the Dalki had chosen to assassinate each of the top countries' leaders around the world. This was to cause chaos and confusion amongst the humans, and for a short time their plan had worked. That was until the head of the Allied Earth forces at the time had decided to take charge. The person's name was Oscar White. Later on, after the war, he had given himself the title of Supreme Commander, and then appointed the 7 head generals on the other basis. Of course, not everyone agreed with this, and there was a disturbance of ability users running wild. It was later on that the big 3 families would be established, and further along the line, True Dream would be added to make it the big 4. In the rose-like building that was seen whilst on the train, there was something called the leader's table inside. Whenever a big decision was to be made, the Supreme Commander, the 7 head generals, and the big 4 would be called together. Seeing the first person to enter was the Supreme Commander, it looked like Quinn's guess of who the other 4 seats were for was spot on. "Will the others be arriving?" Oscar asked his aide on his right that stood by his side. It was a female who wore a fairly short skirt and round glasses with a ponytail. Rather than looking like she worked for the army, she looked like a security for a big tech company instead. "They should be here any second, sir." As she said that, the doors from behind opened wide, and the 4 others entered after. The first person to enter was a large man who looked to be in his 50s, with a huge apple-like belly. His hair was a scruffy mess that went up into a triangle shape, and his nose was large and round as well. He went on to sit in one of the empty seats, and as he sat down, he gave a loud, belching burp. As the air left his mouth, a stream of fire came out with it before quickly disappearing into the air. "Bernie Sunshield, leader of one of the big 4 families with the ability of fire," Sam said. The next to follow after him was a female, who seemed to be mostly dressed in black head to toe, and on the top of her head was a pointy hat. The hat was covering most of her facial features, as there was also a veil attached. The only thing that could be seen through was her large smile and her purple dark hair. Not a word was spoken as she sat down in her seat as well. "Mona Bree, the only female to be part of the Big 4 and head of the Bree family. Their ability, Beast Tamers," Sam explained once again. Just behind her was someone who didn't need any introduction at all. Vorden and Quinn both saw the man's face. The blood around their bodies started to pump harder. "Jack True Dream," Quinn said before Sam could introduce this man. "The ability to steal others' abilities." The last person in the room surprised all 3 of them. "Huh? Wait, this isn't the leader of the Grey Lash family?" Sam said confused, as he saw the last person enter. Although Sam seemed to not recognize the man, Vorden and Quinn did. It was the same person who sat by their side while watching the block event. If he wasn't one of the Big 4, then why was he there?
Hi, Quinn here. Wondering what happens next? If you want to jump the queue and unleash all episodes, click on the link here and install the Pocket FM app.